right, so for my part,
Oh, yeah.
the concerns I had, they're all gone. It's all been removed. So I'll be curious to hear your
I think the last week maybe. Not there being fireworks, we're not. There's nothing on the
Pretty
agenda.
disappointed when they don't have their chance to make, huh? Bummer.
Oh,
5:59, just. Oh.
The meeting, I'll call them.
Jen, you read just a little bit.
Quiet so everyone can hear, please. Good evening, everyone. We are going to start the meeting. This is a special board meeting. And so, because of that, there will be no public input allowed during this meeting and no additions will be made to the agenda that we have. And also, I would like to say, I'm not the usual person up here in front. Chair Nystrom was unable to attend tonight's meeting due to reasons related to his work. So I, Vice Chair Nelson, will preside over our special board meeting. Please be advised that Director Nystrom will be participating virtually in tonight's meeting for observation and to provide input. And we should watch for when he joins us. Okay. However, for purposes of voting, he will be abstaining from all votes because he is not on site for reasons related to his work and not the pandemic. So with that, we will have roll call.
Charles Blacklands,
here.
Kevin Boyles,
Here.
Tom Hagelin,
Here.
Ruth Nelson,
Here.
Bob Nystrom, Jana Shogren,
Here.
5 of 6 present.
Thank you. And Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And first up, we have approval of the agenda as presented. We have a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion from Director Sjogren, a second from Director Hagelin. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Agenda is approved. And I'll turn it over to Superintendent Lane Larson for recognitions.
Perfect. The Lakes Area Music Festival made an extremely generous offer of a $10,000 upgrade to the for a higher-end projector, rather than replacing the same model that was originally installed in the Gitche Zibe Center for the Arts. Once the process started, it was discovered that the upgrade would cost $10,000, and so Terry and Lori Dahl from VSI donated an additional $3,000 to cover the upgrade. And so thank you to all of them for their generous donations. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go on to approval of the minutes from the June 28th board meeting.
I'll move to approve the board meeting minutes from June 28th.
I'll second.
Okay. First from Director Boyles, a second from Director Blacklands. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. And next up, we have the consent calendar.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second. First from Director Blacklands, a second from Director Sjogren. Any discussion on the consent calendar?
I just had one ask, if I could, on the positions that are new, but they're the community ed director positions, I believe, that in the past we haven't seen those on there. I don't know if there's a way to kind of indicate that on indicate on that format. I don't know if Angie can do that.
We can do that. We can do it on a separate sheet and have the community add one separate.
That
Sure.
would be nice.
It doesn't even have to be separate, but just to know that somehow, because I always like to scan the news
Yeah.
and those, stand out because we're doing it differently this year, so.
Perfect.
If it's possible, not a big deal.
I would also like to recognize Charlie Campbell. As everyone is aware, he was offered quite a position with the Minnesota State High School League this week. And Charlie is out here somewhere. There he is in the back. And I'd just like to recognize Charlie for a job very well done and being recognized for his outstanding work. And he truly bleeds Warrior Blue. And so we're really proud of you, Charlie, and we're very sad for us. So congratulations to you.
Yeah, congratulations. You will be missed. It'll be hard to find someone as positive as Charlie has been. So.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have, let's see,
There's a couple of things, so you'll want to do this and do this. We just didn't get numbers, so the presentation is next.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I think I have a motion and a second.
Yep.
Any
Oh,
other
I'm sorry.
discussion?
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. You're just trying to trick me.
Sorry. You got all shaky.
Any further discussion now? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, now we're on to presentations. And first we have Govinda Boudreau and Catherine Lapplance to present on the APEC committee. And I'm happy to be part of this committee now, so welcome.
We actually have, yeah, we have.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
I'll pull another chair
Okay.
over.
Thanks.
Your presentation.
Thanks. Nice.
There's your presentation.
Thanks.
Oh,
Yeah, let's just keep pulling chairs up.
Okay.
Safety in numbers.
It's all yours.
So before you get started, can you just introduce everybody? So,
I think each of us will.
okay.
I'll just stand. Yeah. I think we just need one. We just want one. Yeah. Okay. All right, we actually checked the agenda and we thought we were later on, so this is a speedy piece. Oh, that's perfect. Are we all good now?
yeah.
Okay.
There's a little. And that one works.
All right, so let's do this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So last time that we were here was about our non-concurrence last year. And one of the suggestions was that we come more often to communicate the progress and the things that are happening and occurring throughout the year as we collaborate through the recommendations and your responses to those recommendations as well. And so you guys are seeing the presentation somewhere?
Right down here.
All right, good, because I'm like, where?
Oh, where did it go? There you go.
Perfect, okay. So I just put the Minnesota statute that's up there that adheres to why we have American Indian Parent Advisory Committees, which means that is statute in every school district that has 10 or more Native students, that there is a parent advisory committee and there's certain duties to that committee. And this is a part of our collaboration based on that statute. I'm happy to report that we have been working on actually all of the recommendations, starting with our structured and meaningful collaboration between APAC and the ISD 181. We also are going to talk about what we're doing about data for the context on the achievement gap and what kind of recommendations we've made around that. We also are going to communicate a little bit about some training aspects that are, and some current events that are occurring as well during this time period that relates to, potentially professional development, which is also on our recommendations, and then the assessment rubric that the administrators have filled out as well. And with all, just want to make sure that buttons all work. I'm going to.
Is this working? Okay, great. My name is Catherine Blacklands. I am a parent. I'm a volunteer on this committee, and I'm also the vice chair. In my full-time position, or what I normally do, I do teach intercultural communication. Sorry, can I have you try this one? Thank you. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
A little bit better?
No,
Is
it's
it the
not.
closest to something? Do we need to just use this one? Is that what's going to happen if I move this? Let's do chairs. Yep.
Musical chairs.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, some of you may know, some of you may not know, but I teach intercultural communication at Central Lakes College. And so each semester I take students through their identity development when it comes to their ethnic identity. And for some of us, it's something that we really don't think about a whole lot, right? If we grew up in an area that's homogenous and most of the people look like us, we don't think about our ethnic identity. In fact, we probably didn't have to think about it until somebody called us it, right? And so for me, I am white, and so, I can't remember the first time that I had to think about that, okay? But for people who bring difference to a community, they do have to think about it. And sometimes in the first time they come across it, it's not a pleasant experience. And that's what some of our children have to experience. And so what I take students through is their identity progression. And so as a part of this conversation, we as a committee decided to talk about this, okay? So this first one is called the non-dominant identity progression. And when I'm using the term non-dominant versus dominant, I'm really referring to a dominant identity has more resources and influence, and the non-dominant identities have less resources and influence, okay? And so when we're talking about us as parents, as American Indian or parents of American Indian children coming forward, our children would be considered non-dominant identity, okay? And so this is some of the progression that they have to go through. So first of all, they might not think about it. They might not realize that they're different for a while when they're really little. Everybody plays together nicely, right? And so there's a lack of awareness or a lack of interest in their identity. And then somewhere along the way, they realize that they're different, and sometimes it's because somebody called them a name or asked a question. For Charles and I can remember questions being asked about their dad already in preschool, and the first time that somebody really said a very hateful thing about American Indians in first grade for our oldest daughter. So at that point, children sometimes want to conform. They want to pretend that they're not something different, and so they might dress like, change their hair. For our son, he was coming home and asking to cut his hair. He wanted to cut his hair, he wanted to conform, and we started asking questions. Why do you want to? Well, it turns out some kids had been saying things, so he wanted to conform, right? So in that stage, they internalize or adopt the values and norms of the dominant group in an effort not to be perceived as different. But the reality is that for some kids, no matter how much they try to conform, they're still gonna stand out, right? And so then they can shift to resistance and separation stage. And in that stage, they shift away from the conformity, and then they start to engage in actions that challenge the dominant identity group. Individuals in this stage may also actively try to separate themselves from the dominant group, interacting only with those who share their non-dominant identity. And so that's where you see groups of students kind of collectively staying together. But that's not the goal. The goal is not to stay there. The goal is to push students into interacting with people of all different backgrounds. That's really our goal across, right, for all of us, is
is that they can have an integration stage, is where they mark a period where individuals with a non-dominant identity have achieved a balance between embracing their own identities and valuing the dominant and non-dominant identities. Do I just click this to go forward? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a progression that children, in this community, non-white children go through. And so now I'm going to talk about the dominant identity progression, and this comes into play when we're talking about what is, teachings on equity, whether it's us talking to you as a school board about equity, or whether it's talking to teachers about equity, or whether it's teaching about equity in the classroom. And we have heard that some people are afraid their kids are going to feel bad about things. And so I wanted to address that from an educational standpoint. Again, our goal is to move people forward in these steps. So we have the dominant identity progression, and similar to children in the non-dominant, these children are unaware of their difference. And I think I told you that I was in that stage for many years. I grew up in a homogenous area myself and was in an unexamined stage. And I didn't think about my difference because I didn't face it very much. But then we progressed to the acceptance stage, and this is where a person with a dominant identity passively or actively accepts that some people are treated differently than others, but doesn't do anything internally or externally to address it. For me, the first time that I was aware was in a college classroom. And I encountered a piece of work, and I was like, how did I not know this? How did I go through life, 28 years of not knowing what I had in front of me, that some people were treated differently than others? And I always say in my classroom, or I used to say in my classroom, you might have been like me, that you didn't know. But I feel like in this last year, nobody doesn't know that there's people saying that they're not getting equal access or equal treatment. Our world knows that there's an issue, right? So we can no longer say we're passively. And so that leads actively, accepts that some people are treated differently than others, but doesn't do anything internally or externally address it, okay? And somebody can camp out there. And a lot of times what I hear is people will say, this is how it's always been, it's how it's always gonna be. That's an active acceptance of the way the world is. But again, we don't want to keep people there. We want to push them forward. And so sometimes encountering education might mean that children do experience this resistance stage where the dominant identity formation is a major change from the previous, in that an individual acknowledges the unearned advantages that they're given and feels guilt or shame about it. And for myself, as a 28-year-old, I felt guilt and shame over not realizing that there were differences. And I asked my friends at that time who had experienced, whether they had experienced racism. And they're like, oh yeah, and they were ready to share their stories. But I didn't know it, and I felt guilt or shame about it. But the goal is not to have people camp out in this stage, and that's what education does, is it really helps people learn about the inequalities and then push them forward, again, towards all of us getting along and advocating for equal treatment for everyone, okay? So that brings the redefinition stage. This is where we revise negative views about their identity held in the previous stage, right? Where they don't not like themselves. We don't want that. We want to always value who we are. But they begin to acknowledge their privilege, and they try to use the power, so that extra resources and that extra influence that we talked about, use their power that they're granted to work for social justice. And that's what we'd ask from all of you, from teachers in the system, from staff, everything like that. And then, of course, the last one is integration. Again, this stage is reached when redefinition is complete and people can integrate their dominant identity into all aspects of life, finding opportunities to educate others about privilege, while also being a responsive ally to people in non-dominant identities. And so that's what we're going to talk about going forward, is how you can be allies with this group and other groups other marginalized groups within society. So I am turning things over to Susan.
Well done.
Thank you, Catherine. Oops, wrong one. Okay. So last week I was listening to Minnesota Public Radio, and they were talking with pastors and clergy and about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the churches. And somebody said this quote, and I thought it was really powerful. Accepting the status quo is also a choice. So no matter what choice is made to keep the status quo, or to bravely step into the unknown, co-creating a future and plan that is inclusive of all of our children and all the parts of who they are, no matter what you choose to do, it will take energy and it will take time. Sure, the status quo is more comfortable because it's what we know. And right now, because it's the status quo, it takes less energy to maintain it, so it's easy. But the tides are changing, and people, including Indigenous people, whose voices have long been suppressed, repressed, and ignored throughout our systems, including the education system, are speaking up in numbers and with intensity that refuses to be silenced. Our voices matter, our stories matter, our history matters, our perspectives matter, our ways of seeing and experiencing the world matter. As this tide grows, maintaining the status quo will take more and more energy. So the question becomes, do we step into the discomfort of the unknown now, or do we step into it later? In the book Holding Change, Alexis Pauline Gumbs says, "It is not easy to face the death of how things have been and to open up to the vulnerability of how things could be, but we must." So, in my day job, I do a lot of training with people on trauma, on the impact of trauma, and on resilience building. So one of the things that we talk about is how discomfort is a necessary part of change. Change is new, it's unknown, and the unknown can be really uncomfortable and downright scary. We all have known and experienced that over the last 16 months with the pandemic, all of the unknowns and the fear that that brings up. So as long as something is familiar to us, it's comfortable, even if we don't necessarily like it. So again, in the work that I do, some of the research bears out that people who've experienced a lot of trauma in childhood will go on to become alcoholics or abuse substances. But even more, they are likely to marry somebody who's an alcoholic or who misuses substances. Even more than misusing substances themselves. Why is that? It's what they know. That person will continue the chaos and dysfunction that they grew up in, and it's not a conscious choice. It's not something they consciously choose a partner like that, but unconsciously they are looking for that familiarity of the chaos, of the dysfunction, because that's what they know. So our brains wire through repetition, and what gets repeated, that's what sticks. And then it has the strongest neural connection. So we're gonna do a little activity. This is what I do in my trainings, just to show you what this looks like, okay? So I don't see anyone up here with your arms crossed, but I would encourage everyone to do it. If your arms are crossed, please just uncross your arms, and then go ahead and cross your arms. And when you do that, notice what arm is on top, your right or left arm, okay? Now shake them out, and cross it so the other arm is on top. What do you notice?
Change is difficult.
It's difficult. What else do you notice as you're holding your arms in the way that you usually don't? What else are you noticing?
It feels funny.
Feels funny. Do you want to go back to what you know? Because it's what's familiar, right? So change can be uncomfortable. But we have to, if we want to change, we have to be willing to stay in the discomfort of what's not usual until that becomes what is comfortable. And I can tell you, having done this lots of times through my presentations, it's gotten easier for me to do that. But I used to be the same way, like, okay, what arm goes on top? It's a process. It's learning. Learning can be hard. So one of the things that I want to just encourage us to do is to, as we continue to talk tonight, the rest of the APAC members, to be aware of what is happening in your body. How is your breathing? Is it short and shallow, or is it deep and relaxed? How is your heartbeat? Is it rapid and really hard, or is it soft and relaxed? Are your hands sweaty? Is your stomach turning? What are your thoughts? So a lot of those sensations in the body connect back to being in the stress response, in the fight or flight response. If your heart is beating rapidly, if your breathing is short and shallow, if your hands are cold and clammy, those are all indicators that you are in the fight or flight response. And if we are in the fight or flight response, we can't learn, and it's hard to build relationships and connect. And so the first step is always to check in with where are we? What's going on with us? Because if we can stay in that calm, relaxed state, that is when our prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain, is online. And we can learn, and we can collaborate, and we can build relationship. Without that, the work that we all want to do to build a more inclusive school for all of our children, that's not going to happen. So we constantly have to come back and check in here. Where are we at before we can engage in this? Not sure who's next.
So we do have a couple of videos, but do they actually play through this, the sound? They should? All right, good. I should have checked that with our tech check there. Thank you.
How long are the videos?
They're short. They're a couple minutes.
Okay.
Oh, we have that first one, right? Are you starting there?
Hello, my name is Leanne Wojtaszek. You may remember me from the previous meeting on the 28th of June. I am a volunteer member of the APAC, and I have a student in Brainerd Public Schools. I was in attendance for the previous meeting, and I'd like to say thank you again for the opportunity that you gave the public to speak. I feel like there was a lot of progress made, even if there were some setbacks. There was a lot of advancements made on that day in a good way. Also on that day, the subject of separation of church and state was brought up. I believe that was during some of the discussions that included Christianity and the application of such faith to morality and our public schools. And I wanted to reiterate the importance of the Establishment Clause, which prohibits the establishment of one religion in any public school system. Also, the Free Exercise Clause, which protects the rights to religion also. So there's two sides. And as long as it's non-conflicting with public or moral government, that's not to say that our personal beliefs don't have a place here. That's on the contrary. There has been little to no news coverage of recent events. So it wouldn't be a surprise to me if some or majority of the people in this room today are not aware of things that have been going on involving residential schools. There may be people who are not aware of the recent discovery of thousands of unmarked graves that were discovered in, excuse me, I'm gonna hold this up so I can see better. Residential schools both in Canada as well as the United States here. For some people, that doesn't have a direct effect on the families or rearing of children or the family dynamics in any way. And for others, it is a reopening of old wounds, pre-existing wounds. So the Indigenous community, in every family, there has been somebody who has been impacted, either someone in an Indigenous or First Nations or Native American family either has a relative who never came home from one of the said residential schools, or they are a survivor of a residential school, or they are the descendant of a person who was in residential schools. And the people who are missing probably died of things that could have been prevented had they not been placed in those residential schools. So Carlisle Indian Industrial School was founded by the then captain Richard Henry Pratt. And this was the first government-run residential school for Native American children here in the United States. It kind of set a par for all of the residential schools that followed, both here in America and our northern neighbors, Canada. And it opened in Pennsylvania in 1879 with the intentions of forced assimilation and the belief that was dubbed by Captain Pratt, "Kill the Indian, save the man." That goal of assimilation into Western values included Christianity. Missionaries were assigned to such a task, and hence religion was introduced to government in the school system. Schools then set the tone for the many that, this school then set the tone for the many that followed. In 1973, so that's kind of the recent events that have been going on that Indigenous people are seeing all over what we call Indian country, and it's detrimental to many of us, and at the same time, it's also a growth opportunity. There's many of us who are breaking those chains and who are finding a way to heal that trauma. And part of what we are asking you to ally with us today is, to aid in this healing. So to kind of cycle back and retouch on that free exercise clause that protects those religious beliefs, we as Indigenous people had a landmark, a cornerstone event in history happen in 1978, which is merely 43 years ago. The American Indian Religious Freedom Act was passed. And up until that point, many of us were not allowed to practice our religion, our culture, our language. And a lot of that identity was taken away from the Native American people. And so there was no ceremonies, there was nothing. We couldn't pray. Prayer seems to be very important, and that was taken from this people. It was illegal, against the law. Some of us died because we chose to continue on. Some of us hid and practiced ceremony in secret. First Nation people are also the only people whose religion practices are covered by a law other than the First Amendment. So these are two examples of why these provisions of the Constitution are so important, and the adherence to such in public schools. So that that adherence is so much appreciated. You know, we want all children to feel welcomed and to feel included in our community. And as you see, I'm a new face here, and I didn't feel that when I came. I want my child to feel that, and he don't. But we have the power here as allies to make sure that we move forward, not staying in the past, not holding on to resentments, fears, or harms, but moving forward with forgiveness and working together to rise up above and making sure that all children of every ethnic denomination and belief are welcomed in the Brainerd School District. Not just the Indigenous children, because there's more people transplanting here from all over the world. And I'd like to see them children smile and feel welcome and happy here. And I know each and every one of you would like that also, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here today, right? Right? These videos are, oh, I shared a quote last time, and it kind of went, you know, I'm not always comfortable public speaking, and so I breezed through and missed a lot of high points. But I'm going to share this quote again because I feel it's relevant to discussions from last time, this time, and moving forward. If engagement is the first step in healing, then the second is pure, unadulterated struggle. We will never achieve racial healing if we do not confront one another, take risks, say all the things we are not supposed to say in mixed company. Harlan Dalton, and this is quoted from a book of his called Racial Healing. He is a professor of law at Yale Law School. And these videos, as I mentioned, this first one is Madam Secretary Interior Deb Haaland.
We gotta do some sound things. Right there. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Wasn't.
I forgot about it.
Let's see. Where's my volume? Let's see if this works. Play. Oops. Sorry.
I heard something.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to make it play through the. Try one more thing here.
Another issue that is so personal to me is the devastating.
Is that okay with the board if it plays through here?
Does that sound okay?
I can hear it, but I don't know. Can everyone hear it? Yep, okay.
You'll also
Personal
have
to
this.
me is the devastating history of the U.S. government's boarding school policies. Like many of you, I was deeply impacted by the news of 215 Indigenous children found in a mass grave at a boarding school in Canada. I couldn't help but think of their families. Each of those children is a missing family member, a person who was not able to live out their purpose because forced assimilation policies ended their lives too soon. I thought of my own child who carries this generational trauma with them. I thought of my grandmother who told me about the pain and loneliness she endured when the trains took her away from her family to boarding school. I wept with the Indigenous members of our team here at Interior. Our communities are still mourning. The federal policies that attempted to wipe out Native identity, language, and culture continue to manifest in the pain our communities face, including longstanding intergenerational trauma, cycles of violence and abuse, disappearance of Indigenous people, premature deaths, mental disorders, and substance abuse. But now, for the first time, this country has a cabinet secretary who is Indigenous. I come from ancestors who endured the horrors of Indian boarding school assimilation policies carried out by the same department that I now lead. The same agency that tried to eradicate our culture, our language, our spiritual practices, and our people. To address the intergenerational impact of Indian boarding schools and to promote spiritual and emotional healing in our communities, we must shed light on the unspoken traumas of the past, no matter how hard it will be. For more than a century, the Interior Department was responsible for operating the Indian boarding schools across the United States and its territories. We are therefore uniquely positioned to assist in the effort to recover the dark history of these institutions that have haunted our families for too long. It's our responsibility. Today, I'm announcing and sharing with you all, first, that the department will launch the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative. At no time in history have the records or documentation of this policy been compiled or analyzed to determine the full scope of its reaches and effects. We must uncover the truth about the loss of human life and the lasting consequences of these schools. This investigation will identify past boarding school facilities and sites, the location of known and possible burial sites located at or near school facilities, and the identities and tribal affiliations of children who were taken there. I know that this process will be long and difficult. I know that this process will be painful. It won't undo the heartbreak and loss that so many of us feel. But only by acknowledging the past can we work toward a future that we're all proud to embrace. I don't see it as my role to be the voice for all Native people, but rather to amplify your voices so that American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian communities have a seat at the table to speak for themselves. By sitting at this table together, we can build a better relationship for future generations that is not rooted in the worst parts of our past.
The second video is, I believe, much shorter. However, I feel very connected to this video because these are children that were uncovered at Carlisle residential school, and it shared that there was 164 graves at this school, and 9 of these children were Dakota, and I'm sure we have some Dakota people in this room in our school system and our learning education programs. And one of them were also an Inuit child from Alaska.
The military's been periodically doing these types of projects. The latest group of remains that were disinterred from the cemetery here in Carlisle included 9 Rosebud Sioux children, as well as 1 Alaskan Aleut child. And the remains of the Sioux children were handed off yesterday.
Yesterday morning, the Army formally transferred the remains of all 9 Rosebud children to their families.
That handoff concluded a weeks-long process of disinterring remains from children who died at the Carlisle Indian School and returning them to relatives separated by generations.
You can't imagine someone, their kids just being taken away from them, and like large groups of children being taken away.
Kara Curtin with the Cumberland County Historical Society says the school children taken by the U.S. government were essentially stripped of their culture to assimilate into American society. In recent years, the federal government has sought to return the remains.
Some people, families have tried, for a very long time to get to this point. So it's wonderful to see that shift in public thinking, that this is now something that, the government is doing.
14 of the 164 graves that are at the cemetery are unmarked, according to the U.S. Army. Most of the children that were buried here died from disease. In Carlisle, Tom Lehman, WGAL News 8.
Now, for that last part, although they died of disease and that may be deemed as a natural cause, they may not have incurred those diseases had they been in the right place at the right times. With that, I would like to pass space to the next parent. Thank you very much for your time and listening to us.
Okay. So just really quickly before Govinda gets into the next piece. So again, we're just checking in. We're checking in with our bodies. We're checking in with what's going on with us, our thoughts, our emotions. Because the boarding schools, I can tell you, having done lots of work with people, both Native people and non-Native people, a lot of people in this country don't know the history of boarding schools. And so the first time they hear it, there might be some defensiveness, there might be some shock, there might be some shame and guilt, whatever might be coming up. So just being aware of that, again, and maybe just taking a few deep breaths to get our body and our mind aligned again to be open and receptive. So, Miigwech.
Mm-hmm. It's an upsetting thing for us to go through as well, even when you know about it, to have these things validated in that way. So thank you for letting us take this time to go through that, because that was really on our hearts and minds, because these children are just being discovered right now. This is current and being returned. This just happened 2 days ago. So, and so when we're sitting in meetings and we're debating things like critical race theory, that kind of stuff, and the uncomfortability of children in classrooms, this is our history that's not being taught, right? So this is actually a little slide from Dr. Monica Cox, who works in the healthcare industry, but she said, instead of showing me your diversity statement, show me your hiring data, your discrimination claim stats, your salary tables, your retention numbers, your diversity policies, and your leaders' public reactions or actions against racism and performative allyship. And when I saw this, I thought, this is exactly the kind of structure that we're talking about as well, except for we're saying, instead of showing us your equity statement or your signatures on an equity statement, show us the district data disaggregated by race and compare for risk, graduation rates, disability rates, discipline rates, and achievement rates, your equity policies, so not just statements, but policies, and your leaders' public reactions or actions against racism. So let's end performative allyship and move towards authentic allyship. That we don't ever vote on an equity statement, we uphold equity policies. So these are just some pieces where the administrators went through the self-assessment rubric on Indian education statutes and policies. And these are really, really tiny, but really, essentially, these go through the data portions, right? So special education eligibility and placement, how often is that being reviewed for disproportionality? American Indian dropout rates. And you can see by the colors, even if you're not looking at the numbers, is that there's a whole wash of different responses to this, right? On whether or not we know the data in relationship to this. And the majority of people, majority of our administrators are saying we are at partial implementation, which means that we're kind of analyzing some of these things, but we might not have necessarily comparisons between subgroups or underrepresented groups. It's not done annually, and there isn't a current data collection or analysis efforts that are centralized and formalized. And we can go through within the graduation rates, the attendance rates, and as well as discipline rates, where the same kind of thing shows up, except for within our graduation rates and attendance rates, there was an equal mix between partial and initial stages of this. but still all over the place in terms of that. And what that says to us is that what we already know, essentially, is that we need some work on this area, and that we need to be very, very, all of our administrators, all of our school staff should be understanding what this data looks like and the comparisons and how this impacts the classroom. Because of the differences of American history, American Indian history with education, where education happened to be weaponized against our people as an act of war, it makes a very different relationship with education on a whole. And that's why we need to watch what happens in our classrooms and the triggering effects of this trauma that is carried within children. So just looking at those different responses, I think it really lends itself to professional development and the data. We've already submitted a data request on making sure that those disaggregations happen. Since the early 2000s, that's already been a mandate that disaggregation of data and comparisons are being made. So this is, something that we need to be catching up on anyways. And that we also, as you can see by this wonderful, talented group of volunteers and their knowledge on this committee, we offer our support and our allyship to engage professional development, to never disengage from it, to go through that discomfort. It's an important part of filling that implementation of Indian education in the district. And it's actually on the rubric where full implementation says the district, school, or tribe offers regular trainings for staff on working with American Indian students and understanding American Indian culture, which includes the pieces of history that we shared today. But there's so much more. There's so much more. And that all staff participate within that. Here you go, girl.
I'm Lainey Bolio, and I'm a volunteer and a parent. And then you have a choice to either stay comfortable and maintain the status quo or lean into the discomfort to figure out authentic allyship and make history and lead equity work for the region.
Miigwech. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Get her last name or her first name.
Okay, I'll keep it.
I should have asked, did anyone have any questions? Or anyone?
I did. I just have one question. When you were going through the MDE slides with the pie charts on them, and it was, most of them had 13 or 14 responses, what was the respondent population for the data that you were sharing? Like, were those?
That would be a great question for Tim or the response population. So there were 13 responses in this last year.
13 responses out of 18 possible responses.
And who was responding?
These were the administrative team. This would include principals, directors, and assistant principals.
Within the Minnesota State School System?
No.
Brainerd.
Oh, within Brainerd?
Just the principals and directors.
Okay, thank you.
And can we get those slides on the minutes from this? So, because
I will forward it to you. They just brought it,
okay,
so I couldn't get it ahead of time.
that's perfect. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you very much. We'll go on to our Blueprint 181 project update with Damian Williams and his crew. And thank you for the tour today. It's impressive.
You're welcome. Scott's a great tour guide.
Yeah, high school's looking wonderful, so.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Oh, you see it? I found it. I do. How do I start presentation? Where?
Where it says share,
Right here.
present, no.
Got it.
No, man.
Oh,
Present.
that's pretty close.
All right. Good evening. Here is our presentation for the bond improvements update, July 19th, 2021. We're gonna have project updates tonight, and then we're also gonna review the Wesby scenario options. We'll be looking for review and approval for the projects here at Wesby. Brainerd High School, Scott Whittemore.
All right, Area 2, we're just knocking out some punch list items, so we are waiting on some materials. I think I mentioned last time our broadloom carpet is no longer produced, so part of that warranty work is finding something that's an acceptable replacement. In the auditorium, starting next week, we will see the acoustic banners. They were stuck in Europe for months and months and months, so we finally have them. And we will start installing them next week, Monday. We are communicating with Lakes Area Music Festival because they are renting out the space, and we're trying to coordinate the installs around their downtime. So we are working with them on that. Area 10, diving pool construction. As you saw today, we do have all the forms up. They'll start setting rebar. They're gonna start shotcreting that this week. Area 6, all those fax labs, the CTE spaces, those are complete. They're cleaned. They're just pending a walkthrough with the city official, and we can occupy those. The greenhouse, the structure is complete. We're gonna start working on our electrical and mechanical rough-ins, and those will take about 2-3 weeks, and that space will be complete as well. Area 7, we're just honestly working on finishes. As we saw in the wood shop room, we just got the floor to put in. And then we'll do our final connections to the woodworking equipment. And then area 9, the tie-in steel that we're working on was finishing the roof tie-in on the east side. You saw we had the mid deck and the slab on grade tied in. Roofers will be there this week to get the roof all watertight, and we're gonna start working on rough-ins in those spaces. Any questions on the high school? All right, South Campus. I could read every one of those, but demo is nearly complete in every area. So it's just a giant shell right now. We will be working to bring the site back up to grade. We do have utility piping going in on the south side of the building, and we will start infilling some of those underground rough-in slabs and start framing within the next week. So that one's going really well. Questions on south? All right.
That was impressive too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not much left.
No, it's really looking great. Warrior Early Learning Center site work is complete, and we did a site punch list last week. We have 6 general punch list items open right now, and we're continuing on commissioning. So that project is nearly complete. Garfield Elementary, lots of work is happening at Garfield. Interior demo continues. CMU walls at the teacher's lounge are being installed. Structural steel at the old stage is nearly complete. We're gonna be pouring that floor tomorrow for the storage area. Roof installation is ongoing at the admin area and the kitchen area. Wood blocking at the roof is ongoing. We're working on the canopy out front, getting that ready to do the roofing activities as well. Interior framing and sheetrock are ongoing. They're underway. Kitchen concrete floors have been installed. Gym addition storm sewer is being installed with backfill to follow. So we're waiting for a pipe to install this to make the final connection for the storm sewer. It's held us up a little bit on getting backfill and getting those CMU walls on the gym, but we're going to have that I think this week. So get that back underway. Mechanical and electrical rough-ins are nearly complete in the space, and the boilers have been set.
You said today that this one's on time?
Yep, Garfield
Except for the gymnasium, which we knew would be more like October.
Correct. So. Yep. Garfield is doing well. The kitchen schedule's a little tight. We have met with the teams, and we've come up with a successful schedule that should work. So we're monitoring it every day. Lowell, I'll let Mark present Lowell.
I don't know if there's a...
Well, I had to switch spots.
Sounds good. Okay, Lowell Elementary. A lot of activity taking place here as well. We have mechanical and electrical activities essentially continuing throughout the building. So basically every time we stand a wall, we have an army of craft and tradesmen behind them to install everything that goes within the wall. So lots of activity there. The drywall systems are finished on the lower level for the most part and continuing throughout the building. So that's opening up activities like painting, ceiling grid, and like ceramic tile and activities like that. So starting to get in transition into a finishes stage. Other activities, we have ceiling grid that started on the second floor. And exterior of the building, we had asphalt placed on 3rd Avenue and in the playground area, and the loading dock concrete was completed. Regarding schedule for this project, we are experiencing some delays right now, and we're using some of our tools that we have to take some remedial action with this, and plan to have updates for you shortly. Any questions on Lowell? Riverside Elementary. So very similar place to where Lowell is at as far as overall progress. We have stud framing in the kitchen was recently completed, which opened up a lot of the work to set up the systems for all the kitchens, for all the kitchen equipment. So there's a lot of work that takes place within those walls, and that's underway. In Area C, which was significantly less demo than, say, Area B, so all the way to the south of the building. We've started putting it back together, so we've got ceilings that have gone in, we've started painting walls, and getting geared up for flooring to start this week. Other items to note, mechanical systems are following right behind in a lot of these areas, right behind where walls get stood up, and then last area to note is in the receiving area. The walls, the structural steel, and all the roof decking was put in place. So now we're gearing up for roof membrane to be installed and brick veneer in that area. Any questions on Riverside?
So this one is on schedule.
It is. It's very tight though, and it's a daily problem solving to make sure it stays that way.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay.
You're still up.
Hey, Brainerd Learning Center. So really getting kicked off with or into the design of this project. So we're working through the design development, so adding detail to the schematic design that we had looked at previously. Our designers have done a couple of walks, so specifically the architectural walk and the demolition site walk, where they go and verify walls, what needs to be removed and replaced, and to make sure that we can do that with the plan that we've started to develop. Other items coming up here, the mechanical team is going to walk through the site here this week as well, and they're going to look at where utilities tie in, make sure we have all the appropriate support to the new systems and new places in the building that we need to be able to build them. Any questions there? All right, the Washington Educational Services Building. I think Reed was had some comments to make on this one too, if he's here.
Can I just quick comment as Reed's coming out regarding the schedule? I think one of the things we have to be aware of, but I'm sure you guys are, that our contractors they're short supply manpower. They're working their 50, 60 hour weeks and hot days. And I think as we look in the future in scheduling, that we're going to have to we should be mindful of what they're pushing through, that they can't add to their labor force, or just people don't exist. So I would suggest, as we do our planning, as we open up buildings, that we're mindful of there might be some delays. I realize that they're all under contract, but it's just a reality that exists out there, that there's a labor shortage in particular in that market. So I think we've got to just be planning for that.
On the 3 elementary schools right now, we're doing about $16 million over this 90-day period of time. And it's no small feat. I mean, it's still a lot of work that has to get put in place, and there's a lot of interesting things that are coming up. We're seeing shortages on drywall mud, we're seeing shortages on paint, we're seeing shortages on steel studs. A new one came up today, ductwork, metal for ductwork. Just very strange things, so we're still working through some strange times, but all in all, everybody's putting their best foot forward right now. We're just trying to do the right things here to make sure that we're successful.
And we have to thank all of our principals at those schools to allow you guys to get in early too, so we did get a jump start. So
yeah, absolutely.
That was a saving grace.
Absolutely.
Okay, Washington Education and Service Building.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we're, timing-wise, we're wrapping up a lot of our work. Well over 3/4 of our work will be done here after this summer. So we're getting there. We're nearing the horizon there. And so that being said, the last big decision that we have to make is what the scope of the Wesby building is going to look like. I think, this is before I came here. You guys always had a plan that Wesby was always going to be the last one, right? The administration group was going to take the last improvement to the project, and now we're faced with what do we want that scope to look like? We had an idea of what that scope was going to be. It was about a $5 million project. It was to address ADA access to the building. It was going to address our facilities, our toileting facilities within the building. It's still the same toilets in the building from when it was originally built. Decades and decades ago. So we have some improvements to make there for accessibility, and then we're doing our safe and secure entrances, right, like we've done on every single other school. The goal was that if there were funds remaining at the end of the project, that we would look at the physical needs of the building. So some of you were here when we did a physical needs assessment, and there was about $20+ million worth of needs to this building. That if we take an escalator from when that study was done in 16 and 17, we're looking at about 28 million, I believe, Mark, is what that construction value would be today. Okay, well, we don't have 28 million in remaining project funds. So the challenge is now, how do we get all of the necessary things done now when we have an opportunity, or when we're going to take an opportunity and leave the remaining things left over that we can do down the road? I think that's the challenge we have in front of us here, is how far do we want to take that list? Based on that feedback that we got from you all before, we went back and we put together some scenarios. So in front of you here are a list of 6 scenarios, and it's in ascending order here. So scenario 1 is going to be our smallest project, the original project that we had on board here. Scenario 6 is the complete needs assessment for Wesby. So everything: ventilation, mechanical, electrical, architectural, civil, structural, all of the upgrades all together, and that's coming up to the 27 million. Scenario 5 is a relocation of the front entrance to the south side of on Pine Street, to the south side of the building. You might recall we've done this at multiple schools already. We moved the entrance of Harrison off of Oak Street because of how busy that front entrance used to be. We did that at high school. We moved it from 5th Street, and we're going to be installing the new parent drop-off, and the bus drop-off is down in the lower lot. But we're getting it off of these busiest streets for the safety of our families. So scenario 5 talks about that relocation entrance. Those 2 scenarios we don't have funding for right now. We don't have the money in our overall construction budget for that. So what Damien and the team has done here is we put together scenarios 1 through 4 for you, which we think are reasonable projects to do with the funding that's available, but we're going to defer to your guidance on what you would like us to do. Scenario 1, going up the list here, scenario 1 is those ADA bathroom upgrades. It is addressing safe and secure entrances to our facility without relocation, and it's included in here is new steam boilers and controls for improved temperature control. This scenario does not address the ventilation issues that we have in the building today, like we're kind of feeling in the boardroom right now. So this would not address that. Scenario 2 is a little bit different look at that $5 million funding source. It is the ADA bathroom upgrades. It is a safe and secure entrance relocation. So we would be potentially flipping that entrance to the south side of the building, and it would be less of a controls project and a smaller boiler upgrade. Actually, it would just be controls for $625,000. That would be scenario 2. Scenario 3 and 4 are what we think are the best 2 options, and scenario 4 is our preferred scenario here to get the safety and security of the building, but it also addresses the ventilation needs of this space. So when you look at scenario 4, we're seeing the ADA bathrooms, we're seeing a relocated front entrance, we're seeing new steam boilers, new automated controls, and 2 new air handling units that would serve the classroom wing or the classrooms on the 1st floor and the administration offices on the 2nd floor. This does neither scenario 3 nor 4 address the ventilation in Tornstrom Auditorium, the gymnasium, or the cafeteria.
Or 3rd floor.
Or third floor. Third floor was done here in 2012, yep.
So the only difference in scenario 4 is the changing the entrance to the
Scenario
back.
3 and scenario 4 are the same ventilation, the same ADA upgrades to the facility. It's just that we would be, on scenario 4, we're flipping the entrance to the south side and utilizing space on the south side of the building better.
I'm going to jump in just a second. In scenario 4, the difference is that the main entrance for drop-off and pickup of children and employees parking back there, they would use that entrance. People that came during the day, we would still have a controlled entrance here on the front where they can park on the street and come into the building. Or if they're coming to Tornstrom, they can still do that. So it's still going to look like this lovely building on the front with safe and secure access. But the entrance that we use for the safety and security would be much like we did with Harrison, where we took the main entrance where the children go in and out, and we took it off of Oak Street. And that's the difference between 4 and scenario 3.
Okay. And so from a funding standpoint, the increase from the $5 million project to either the 12.2? 12.2 or the 14.075, that increase would come from the unallocated fund balance that we have on the projects right now, which is kind of a combination of good timing on our bond sales, bid performance that we've been under on a few of our projects. What else am I missing?
Indoor air quality.
Health and safety bond. Yep, and we have remaining indoor air quality bonds to issue as well. So that's the capacity that we would have available, which again, when we're talking ventilation and heating and cooling of our educational spaces, indoor air quality applies right to that specific scope. So that's why we added that scope in scenarios 3 and 4.
And we're leaving the contingency on all of our other projects that we need still, so we're
That
not
would
stealing from-
still be leaving contingency balance on all the other projects. That's correct.
And we're staying under that $7.
And we're staying under the $7 amount. And actually, we had an update from Ellers here, from Greg Crow, that Marcy was able to get here 2 weeks ago. And you know, we're trending under that $7 mark a ways. So there's some bonding capacity there for indoor air quality projects if we wanted, if there was ever a need to go forward with that. If we wanted to talk about ventilation for the gymnasium or Tornstrom Auditorium or making those improvements, we do that and still not be over that $7 mark, but that would require additional bonding. And again, it's the board's discretion on that. So.
And before we go any further, I think Director Nystrom is on. He can hear us, is that correct?
Yes, he can hear us.
And, okay, so can you say hi, Director Nystrom? Okay, when you can, just break in so we know that you've heard everything. Okay, thank you. Questions?
He texted me.
Well, just a couple other comments too. We'd asked Reed and the team to bring in some of the local contractors, particularly with the HVAC piece, to come through and get their thoughts, recommendation, ideas as well. Certainly on a remodel project, there is the best time to do it versus a second best time. And so I just appreciate you guys really putting forth the work. Last Tuesday, we did hear from Greg on some of the funding and where that would fall in, that even if we were to do the scenario 3 or 4, that we'd still fall below our goal of $7.
Correct.
That seemed to make sense. For me personally, whether it's 3 or 4, I'm kind of fine either way. I do think it really is the right time to take care of that air quality, along with our security, safety, and the other pieces too, if we can.
Yeah, Director Hagelin, obviously not everybody has been in the crawl spaces and in the basement of this building to see the challenges. It's a difficult building to work within and maintain, the architectural integrity of the building. We're going to do that. And I don't think we're looking for picking, a specific design today. We're looking for picking that budget so that we can get the design team working on it and coming up with options. And then once we get that budget set, we can work on what all the solutions look like. So we're not saying we have a solution in front of you today. We're just looking to get a feel for where in this budget line do we want to be. Like I said, we started at 5 and we know the needs are 28. So where do we want to put our thumb on that line in between there? And with the funding available, we can go at either one of those 3 or 4. Our recommendation would be 4.
So to that point, Reed, on the funding available, just for the benefit of people that will be watching, can you explain both the health and safety bond, what that actually means, and what the $7 means?
So the $7 a month threshold was based on the tax value of Crow Wing County, right? And so that's how much we were going to go out and bond for, was $7 a month based on the taxable value at that time. That converted over to $145 million of bond sales. And Damien, correct me if my numbers are wrong here. You got the budget sheet, I don't necessarily. But we also brought to the table a number of fund reserves and other levy funding sources that were available to us, like abatement dollars, health and indoor air quality, and then our capital and our long-term facilities maintenance bonds. So all of those things, all of those ingredients added together added up to the $205 million project scope that was passed by the voters a couple years ago. So I think I answered your question there, right? So that $7 a month on the tax value of Crow Wing County equated to that dollar amount of funding for the school district to be able to make these improvements to our facilities. We're actually under that commitment right now and have been able to get all the projects done and have a little bit of capacity left to look at this last project and address the needs here within Wesby.
And just because I'm curious about it, let's say scenario 2. Is that the work that's done there, is that scalable in the sense that if you did that $5 million of work and we, a year later, 2 years later, wanted to upgrade the ventilation or whatever, would we be redoing work we did during that project, or can we build on what was done there?
I would say the controls piece of it, you're going to lose some efficiency there because we're designing it to a specific system,
so
and then you're going to go back
and
redo a bunch of it. Yeah, so you're redoing work at that point. There's going to be, if we do the ventilation projects 3 and 4, there's going to be other architectural things that are going to need to be done within the facility to make that ductwork come through here. We just can't fit it in the spaces that we have available to us now, but we're going to maintain that integrity of Wesby, of the historic building that we have here. So the archways and the hallways and all of the things that are unique to this building.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, absolutely.
Bob Nystrom here. Sorry about the glitch earlier on. I too, like Tom, support either 3 or 4.
Bob, just hold on a second. I think you need to be a little bit louder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
First time we've ever said that.
Can you get him?
Oh.
Where is his speaker coming from?
It's coming through the overhead.
Mine's coming off. Well, I'm actually on a phone here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's much better.
Oh, great. So yeah, I support either 3 or 4. This has been delayed maintenance for way too long. This is a 91-year-old building that, because it's an administrative building primarily, although it does house students, it has really been left on the wayside. And yet the community of Brainerd really treasures this building, and it really needs this maintenance, including the air quality. So I highly support this.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
I kind of think it's important. Initially, I wasn't so gung-ho on the moving the safe and secure entrance for the kids, but I was thinking we were going to move the whole entrance back there. But I think the idea of having this be the welcoming for the community members at large, but getting those buses and kids to the back where there's no traffic, I think that's really important for those kids.
Yeah.
And our key thing on this was safety and security when we started it. So, and I think the ventilation, as we can tell tonight, probably it's time to redo that. So,
one of the things Reed didn't mention is a lot of the current HVAC equipment, the steam boilers are at the end of their life.
Yeah, they are. Yep.
So so whether you do the project or don't do the project now, you're going to have to take on some of these costs
eventually
in the future, just because of the life expectancy of the equipment.
Yeah, and then Tom mentioned it earlier here too, you know, we had installing contractors here, we had mechanical and electrical engineers on site walking the building and looking at it, and again, as a mechanical engineer myself, it's to my heart when we start talking ventilation and HVAC and boilers and all of those things, but they are really nearing their end of their life, and we can kick the can down the road a little ways, but we're gonna have to have a strategic plan even after we do any of these projects on the list. There's still a number of things that are going to be coming due to this building. And so we're going to be talking about roofing and envelope and other things that we're going to be faced with 1, 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the road. And so that's why you hear us talking about preserving our capital and preserving our long-term maintenance money. We have to bank on that. We can't be just paying the mortgage. We have to use some of that money to make the improvements to the facilities that we're going to need to make. And you know, all the improvements that we're making to all of our other schools 25, 30 years down the road, we're gonna have to be having this conversation again about, you know, roofs have to get replaced and maintenance has to be done. So we think that this is a good spot to be in, good improvements to make, and we can address the other things as we go down the road, and we'll create a plan to address the remaining parts of the list that we're not able to do within this project.
The other thing I would like to say too is I'm sure all of you heard it on the news about how many districts are worried about their air quality after what's happened with COVID, and you need much better air quality. And in this building, we have some of our most vulnerable kids downstairs. Yep. And so they deserve the best air quality we can give them. Yep. So. And so
we're going to address ventilation by quite a bit on these projects. You'll see scenario 4, that there is a line item there, additional funding for Pine Street relocation. We're gonna have to come up with some money to finalize that, and that could be remaining contingency. It could be something along those lines that we use to fund that source, because health and safety, LTFM, all of those are restricted funding sources. We can only spend them on certain specific things. So we are a little bit handcuffed on what we can use those funding sources for, but there's enough need. We're going to spend them. There's enough needs within the building. We're going to spend them all. The comment I'm going to make on that, Director Nelson, is you talked about the the ventilation concerns in schools because of the pandemic. You know, there is ESSER funds available. Marcy is working on her outlook of what the ESSER funding for the school district is going to look like, but there could potentially be some ESSER funding available if we wanted to supplement some of these. And so when we think about that, we think about you know, health and safety projects in general that we would spend that money on. And again, those ESSER dollars have restrictions to what they can be used for as well. But ventilation is one of those things.
I like scenario 4. It's just that little TBD down there makes me a little nervous.
And that scope difference, Director Boyles, is the difference between 13.5 and 14.075. So we're talking the 575,000 difference.
And
no,
and this is without using any of the ESSER
without any of the ESSER money. There is.
But even if you did that, you couldn't redirect, or could you redirect some of that to the entrance part from one of these other funding sources? Didn't you just say they were kind of?
Depends on where we're putting that ESSER money.
Health and safety is the safety part for the entrances?
That health and safety, I think, is more related to like air quality and other things. I don't know that it's air
quality and asbestos abatement.
Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily general building safety. I think it's more health safety versus physical.
So we do have the money to bridge that $575,000 between a couple of other funding sources if we need to. We could obviously look at the ESSER funding and see what's available there and how it can be used as well. So there's some opportunities. You know, you kind of got to see how the jigsaw puzzle comes together with the funding.
You know, and we have to get further down the road to solidify these costs.
We got to get a design put in place. We got to get some drawings on paper to get a better idea of how much we can actually qualify for each source. Okay. Yep.
Timing's always important. I know. Do we have any time to figure out what that TBD is before we make this decision, though? Do we have to decide between 3 and 4 tonight, or can we find out what TBD means before we decide on 4?
I think the board action is to select an option and set a budget for Wesby.
How about if we set a budget for 13.5 and see what you can, we want option 4 done at
3.5.
13.5, yeah.
Option 3.5?
Yeah.
Well, it's a hybrid.
Yeah, 3.5.
You guys know that by now, right?
Yeah.
But even if it's 13.5, I really believe that that entrance for dropping kids off and picking them up on the south side is a critical piece. One of the things we're most proud of with Harrison is that we got those drop-off pickups off of Oak Street.
Yep.
And the first goal that we have in this referendum was safety and security of our kids. And to leave them on Washington, I think or on Oak Street, excuse me, is really difficult. The other thing that I'd like to say is the ESSER, as Marcy's going to talk about in a little bit, we have quite a lot of unallocated in ESSER. So, and she's going to share that with you in a little while. The other thing is we're just leaving contingency exactly the way it is. Right now we've got about 73% or 74% of our project done, and we've used 70% of the contingency, is that correct?
4%.
So we're still about 4% ahead in the contingency, which if it stayed, that would be way over $500,000. But I agree, I'd like to get it done for 13.5, but I'd like to still put a priority on having a safe and secure entrance in the back so that we drop off and pick up our children off of Oak Street.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, maybe some other storage areas that are converted into something else doesn't happen. I mean, we're talking, it's 5%.
Right.
I would think that for 13.5.
And really, this is really to give the design team a target to shoot for, because we can't tell the design team you're designing a $5 million building and then we can say we got $14 million of asks. They're not going to design it to that. So what we really want to do is have this target for the design team to work on and say we're designing to 13.5 if you wish. We'll design to 13.5 and see if we can't get everything all inclusive in that scope, and if we gotta massage that a little bit to make it work, or if we identify that additional funding source, Director Boyles, we can bring that back to the table and have a conversation with you at that time. But
no, I agree with Director Hagelin. I think it's a good idea. I think you used words that are near and dear to several of the board members' hearts on not kicking the can down the road.
Yep.
Dealing with what's in front of us while it's in front of us. I think, safety of the kids should come first. So that needs to be part of it, in my view.
Would you like to make a motion? We need a motion for this.
Sure. I'll make a motion that we approve the design team to explore a design option using scenario 4, but trying to make it work for $13.5 million.
So option 4 for 13.5 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Option 4.1.
I'll second that one.
Okay, and tonight, Chair Nystrom, we have you down. You're not voting tonight. You'll be an abstention on all of these, so.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Okay.
I understand.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion from Director Boyles and a second from Director Hagelin. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Good discussion. That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, next up is talking about the playground proposal at the Warrior Early Learning Center.
okay, I'm gonna get off. I want to sit on the tallest chair, not short. I am going to, I just share it with school board. If I have a document, I can share it to school board at. Sorry. I forgot that I needed to share a document here. Okay, well, I'm opening this up. I'm just going to do a little bit of a summary for you, for the board members that don't sit on our project oversight team. 2 project oversight teams ago, we brought forward a request for a playground addition to the Warrior Early Learning Center. You may recall when we selected the when we designed the project for the Warrior Early Learning Center, the estimates and the bids on the design came back in and we were a little bit high on the project. And so what we did is we took some of things out of the project to get the building constructed, because that's our #1 goal. We have to have the classrooms for the kids. With that, the playground equipment that was at the old Baxter Elementary, the new Warrior Early Learning Center, is really playground equipment that's suited for older kids. And so we're talking about 5 to 12-year-olds, I think, or 6 to 12-year-old kid age groups, right? Tani does not have that age group at her school. So those play pieces are not safe for the littlest kids that are climbing around on there. So we do have some equipment here at Wesby that you see on the side of the building that is suited for little kid play. We at the Brainerd Learning Center, there are a few pieces outside on the asphalt that we put rubber base underneath to make it a little bit more cushy for the kids to play in when the weather is nice. But really the play spaces for our earliest learners are a little bit shy. So the challenge we have in front of us is getting play equipment over at the Warrior Early Learning Center that is suited for those kids. And so two project oversight teams ago, we brought forward a playground design and a scope for, I think it was just over $250,000 for the 2-container play system at the Warrior Early Learning Center. A little bit of the feedback was that what can we do to trim that down? We don't have budget allocation for this, so again, we would be dipping into either some of the unallocated funding, we'd have to go into capital, we'd have to go into other funding sources that would feed that playground. And so Tani was able to work with Jeff in my office and redesign, I'm sorry, I'm talking and not getting the drive shared for you, redesign the playground for the Warrior Early Learning Center, and it came in at $169,000, I think. 158 and 21.3. $179,000. $179,983.90. So we were able to redesign that down. It is set for growth, and I'm going to get this document shared here. Apologize, I should have had this done ahead of time. Okay. Apologize for the delay. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So the equipment cost is $158,683.90. Installation cost of $21,300. There's 2 containers at the Warrior Early Learning Center, one kind of right in the middle of the school and one that's further northeast by the OK Park parking lot. This would be the smaller container behind the school. This would be for our earliest learners out there. Blow this up a little bit for you. Sorry, I should do it the other way, this way. And I'll give you a 3D rendering of what this looks like here. But essentially, instead of filling this entire container, we trimmed it back. This is going to be, I think, just a wood chip mulch out here just for creative play. This is going to be a poured rubber surface for accessible students. So we'll be able to have some accessibility play pieces out there. Again, slide and shade pieces, and then a bunch of other associated equipment. This is the second container. Again, half of the container will be just wood chips. This entire container, I should say, is wood chips. Half of it will be more open for future growth. And then that is what the pieces will look like on the littlest learner playground. And this is what the equipment will look like down here. Those were different views of it. This is what the equipment will look like on the older kid playground. Tani, do you want to speak to why this is important for you guys in your program?
Yeah, I sure can. Good evening, everyone. So just to piggyback on what Reed was saying, the difference between the 2 playgrounds and why it's really important that we do have both. We do have about 375 kids at one time that'll be going through, like in a morning section. Total throughout any given day, we'll have about 500 kids and families coming through the space. And so even with that amount of students, it's actually Probably not even an option to have them use it on a daily class basis. We will have to still rotate it through and time block that out for all of the sections to be able to get through. We do have the, Reed referenced, the youngest learners we have, birth to 3-year-olds that need a little bit more of a stable ground. You can imagine the wood chips get a little bit challenging when we're working with the 1- and 2-year-olds. And then we do also have that pre-K going to K group, as well as we'll house the majority of the preschool childcare as well at this site. So some of those kids are there all day, every day as well. So just that accessibility between the two spaces.
Okay. So our challenge with this is just understanding the scope of what we'd like to install out there. Tani's recommendation that the equipment that's in front of you here at this price is the bare minimum of what would be needed for play outside at the Warrior Early Learning Center. We could fill the containers and have, as that building grows, because how many classrooms are you having right now this year? And it's set for 22 classrooms, right?
Yeah, we'll have 18 active classrooms starting this fall. And there's growth for 22.
So just a comment again, thank you, Tani and Reed, for working on this. I know we put them to the task a few meetings ago, at least a month ago, on trying to bring this cost down from what it was, and substantially you've done that. And it seems like it's kind of a nice compromise that it still gets us the equipment we need. We've got some growth opportunities with it, but brings it a bit more in line from a budget standpoint.
One last thing that I'll add here too. So the pricing that we received here is CPC pricing. So when you look at regional cooperative purchasing agencies throughout the state of Minnesota, the CPC does most of it, and then we know we have Sourcewell here for us. Sourcewell just got a Play World contract set up here. So one thing we're going to do too is get pricing from that vendor that is now awarded under Sourcewell to try and get contracts underneath them. So we'll get a pricing for this same equipment under Sourcewell so we can compare the two cooperative purchasing co-ops. We satisfy Minnesota bid law with one because it's already been pre-bid through the co-ops, but we're going to get a second price between the co-ops just to make sure we're getting the best value possible.
And Reed, remind me again, I know I'd asked about landscape structures, but I think you did get a bid and they were higher.
So when we put in the playground equipment for the Baxter, new Baxter Elementary, we did have a quote for landscape structures and Play World. And when we compared the two prices for each kind of playground, landscape structures were about 20% higher than Play World was. Through the CPC, so that's why we went back to the CPC again for this stuff here, is because it was better pricing.
So we don't have any budget for this, so how are we paying for this?
Well, it would have to either come from unallocated fund balance, which if we're gonna allocate all of our money towards the Wesby building, really this would only come out of capital. It can't come out of anything else other than capital. So it would either come out of the capital reserved for construction or out of capital fund balance. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marcy.
So you could use the construction funds, the uncommitted, or if you guys didn't want to go into that, we could just go into our regular capital account, but that was not one of the options we discussed in oversight, so.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, just a comment. I also want to thank Reed, Marcy, and Tani to figure this out. It is a really good compromise, and I would like to hear what the administrative recommendation is moving forward.
So I guess to clarify your question, Director Nystrom, I mean, Tani's recommendation would obviously be to have the playground equipment as was originally presented. She understands the budget challenges that we're faced with, and the presentation in front of you here today is her recommendation of what would be needed to get by until we can fund the remaining playground equipment out there and until we fill that school up to full capacity. is how I understand your request.
The little umbrella
Okay.
things on there. Oh,
Yep.
I mean, they don't look like they're shading any of the playground equipment. What's the purpose for them?
It is shade structures for out there. Obviously, our playgrounds are used by everyone, you know, at all times of day. You look at Harrison and Garfield, I've been to those buildings on nights and weekends, and it's bustling with activity from the moment school is out through until it's dark out. So, and even after dark in some cases.
Movable, or?
What's that?
Are they
No, those are
movable?
fixed structures. Those are just fixed shade canopies that are attached in the playground there.
And they do shade the playground equipment.
Yep, depending upon where the sun is, yep. And we have shade structures on our equipment at Harrison now. It's on the tops of these, tops of the climbing structures at the top of the slide.
Okay.
So I guess really what we're looking for here is just guidance and direction on, should we continue this route, or are you looking for us to do something different?
I'm still trying to figure out where we're gonna pay for it if we're spending all the money here and you don't wanna take it out of capital.
Well, we have about $1 million of uncommitted capital, and, you know, he had presented that there'd be about 500,000 that we'd be committing with Wesby. So you still have an additional 500,000 that we could use for this.
In the bond referendum.
Correct.
Correct. But we had talked about not using some of our general fund dollars and keeping it so that we could move, you know, be able to function as we move forward.
Right.
And it would come out of that.
Okay.
Because that's that capital, that 500,000.
When would it get installed? If we decided to go for it today, when would it be ready to play on?
We would push to see and try and get some of this equipment before the start of the school year. More than likely at this point now, we're gonna be leaking over into the start of the school year though, but it would be before winter conditions. And those playgrounds are used, you know, year round. A little bit more difficult with the shorter classes that they have at the Warrior Early Learning Center, and that's where our large motor room comes into play. And obviously you got a gymnasium now that we didn't have at Brainerd Learning Center before, so winter conditions, they can do some inside play. But in that spring and fall, we can get the kids outside where that's the best spot for them to play.
And there are also some all-day programmings there, the
Yeah.
childcare, and then we all have all-day preschool options as well that still put that in the
I think we absolutely have to support this. You know, Tani has done a compromise here. These kids really need this playground equipment. I mean, there's not another age group that probably really needs this other than K through 2. And, you know, we need to move forward. We need to make a commitment to them and figure this out, but allow them to base it on the 179,000.
Is that what the total is, 179?
Yeah, I think even if you got an alternate quote from a different vendor, I mean, you know, at best, we're gonna shave $4,000 or $5,000, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't solve the macro issue.
We're going to do everything we can to get this down as low as possible with this type of equipment, but we're just really looking for a direction before we put any more effort into it.
Now, I'm not steeped in district history as well as Director Nystrom is, so maybe you all can help me out. But in other school districts that I've lived in, where I've been on committees, when something like this came up too, we kind of would put a plea out there, and sometimes like for playgrounds specifically, a lot of times like the Lions and these other clubs would sometimes step forward. Do we have some sort of mechanism for doing that kind of outreach to those benevolent organizations to see if they might help us defray some of this? Or is that something the district doesn't normally do? I don't really understand the process of that. I'm kind of new to this group.
I think because we already went out and asked the community for this whole project, we kind of wanted to stay within that budget and not ask the community for more dollars, if that makes sense.
Sure, at the citizen level, I completely agree. But I would tell you, I know people that are in those organizations and they have pull tab things, and they're sometimes looking to dispose of money, and so sometimes it's a timing thing.
Okay.
So that's really all I was asking it for, was that there may be, you know, I don't know, I'm in sales, all they have to do is say no.
I think, you know, that's could definitely be an option for us as we look to
Right, I'm saying we
expand
would
and fill
approve it
in,
anyway,
right?
but with
Yeah.
the you know, the idea that somebody like the Lakes Arts Festival steps up and kicks in 10 grand here and whatever, you know, again, I've been in places where as long as they get to put their sign that playground equipment donated by Baxter Lions or whatever.
And early childhood is unique in that we have gone out. I've presented at different organizations like that to get an additional second step, social emotional curriculum, little pieces like that. And so I am happy to continue to do that.
I wouldn't put it on you to do that, Tony. I guess I'm just saying it out loud so it's out there to just say that, you know, whatever we move forward with, I would say that if there's a community organization out there that wants to help, I mean, every single meeting that we come to where we look at Marcy, we're trying to figure out how to move walnuts around and figure out where the pea is underneath one of the shelves. And there's only so much of that we can do before,
The good thing at the point we are at with our projects, there's not a whole lot of big surprises that are left. So we probably do have the money to do this.
And we are, I'll just add to your comment there, Director Nelson, is that, you know, we are at the end of the project. We just talked about Wesby and that we're talking about the last big hurdle here, right? There is going to be a list of things that we're going to be coming back to from every single site. Every single site has something that we didn't do at it because we had a budget originally designed and we said no to a lot of things throughout that design process. When we get all said and done with this and we talk about those contingency dollars that we had in our savings account for the what ifs that pop up, we're going to want to talk about those and say, now are there other needs that we prioritize down the list where we drew the line that we're going to want to come back and address. And so I will tell you that at every site there's going to be that. And expanding, you know, the playground could be one for the Warrior Early Learning Center. There are other things. We've deferred roofs. We've done other things that that we could talk about when we get to the end of the project.
We have quite a bit of stuff at the high school.
There's a lot. Yeah, yes. There's a lot on these lists all across the board. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah. So
do you have what you need, or?
I think so. I mean, I think that we've heard the board say that you would like to keep it where we're at and move forward with it. We can work on, you know, what I will do is we'll get another set of pricing here just to make sure that that is a best price scenario for us. And if it is, we would bring it back for, or we'd go forward with the board action on that. So
Okay, I have one other question.
Yes.
The tree.
Yep.
Are we keeping it?
At this point, I know it creates a logistical challenge for Tani as far as just, you know, things that can be picked up and choked on and everything else. We have to have a conversation about that. We'll handle that. We'll handle that internally and see what we need to do logistically.
I would like it to be saved. It includes shade. A live tree, yeah.
There's a very substantial oak tree right next to the little playground there that drops a lot of acorns that kids like to be curious about. So we just have to be really cautious about that. It was fine for the elementary school when it was there, but we're talking about a different age group here, so.
Okay, it provides shade, so.
Yes.
Anyway.
Okay.
Don't cut it down without coming back to us.
Sure.
I think it died last weekend.
I don't believe so. Was there a board action that we needed to?
There is not a board
action. It was just for
action
discussion
yet.
on that one.
It's
Yep.
just
Okay.
discussion
We
tonight.
got direction from you then. Or, well, discussion on it, yep.
So you'll still continue to try to get the best price that you can, and then we'll move forward with those modified, what did you call them again, not compartments?
Containers.
Containers,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Okay, next up is approval of a resolution for a public hearing, and Marcy's going to speak to this.
And I'm going to bring up a document actually just because I feel like we've had a lot of discussion about the $7 and I'd like you guys just to see this. So when we were talking about Wesby and the equipment and all of that, you know, the big question is are we staying within the $7? So can you bring up my chart? Can they? No, it's okay. So in 2019, we passed the referendum. That's the big gap on this chart. And then if you go across, that would be the $7. So this next item is the hearing. You're approving a hearing for abatement bonds. The difference between abatement and just our regular bonds is there is a required hearing for that. That's the one difference of the steps. But once we get those issued, it would fill in this gap from 21 to 22. And so we'd stay at that $7 still. So in all the projections with Ellers, they had 205 million. With interest earnings, good bond sales, we are above that 205, but we're still below the $7 cap. So I just wanted to show you guys this chart. And also when we're talking about WESB and the additional funding, that is, all of the uncommitted funds are going towards that project. However, there is down the road additional funding we could levy that would potentially help with that indoor air quality, you know, the next steps, the next phases. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
And still be under that $7 line, that $7 horizontal line. And it's kind of, it's really hard to see here, but if you draw that line horizontal across those two highest bars, there is a small sliver on every single one of those years from 2022 all the way through 2040 that would be under that $7 mark.
And we did a partial issuance of the abatement bonds back in 2019, and then what you're approving tonight is the remaining funds. So after that, we should have no more abatement issuances.
Okay, so we're not doing the date for the public hearing on this, or?
So you approve the resolution, and then at August 9th, we will actually have a presentation and hearing for the public.
So that's when the, okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution providing for a public hearing.
I'll second.
So we have a first from Director Sjogren, a second from Director Blacklance. Any further discussion? Okay, none. This is a resolution, so we need a roll call vote.
Kevin Boyles.
Aye.
Tom Hageland.
Aye.
Ruth Nelson.
Aye.
Bob is abstaining. Correct?
Yes.
Janice Sjogren.
Aye.
Charles Black Lance.
Aye.
All present, all in favor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is everyone okay if we add public hearing on August 9th to it, just for clarification, since you brought it up? Okay.
Okay, next up, we have approval of the Sourcewell proposal for parking lot mill and overlay. And
Okay, me again. Yeah, got me a couple more times here yet. In front of you is a proposal from Sourcewell for a mill and overlay. Again, going back to our conversation about remaining project dollars, there is a number of abatement funds available to us. I believe the number is like $381,000. Damien would have the exact number, but that was the update we last received from him. So in front of you is a project to mill and overlay the parking lots at Forest View. I presented to the project oversight team some photos and evidence of our sidewalk conditions at Forest View and parking lot conditions out there. We're already past the top layer of wear course. We're seeing aggregate in our parking lots. Earl, when the parking lots were built in 2005, Earl has done a great job of maintaining them, crack sealing them, doing all the maintenance things that we would need to do to get them to where they're at today. If we don't do a mill and overlay right now, we're going to see in probably 3 to 5 years some substantial failure within the pavement system itself. If we mill and overlay them now, we're going to get, I would say, at least 10, but more like 15 and plus years out of these parking lots like we saw out of the first parking lots out there. So in front of you is a recommendation from me to mill and overlay all of the parking lots at Forest View that we didn't do as part of the project, and to repair the sidewalks across that facility that are spalling out from wear and from salt and our winter conditions that we have here in Minnesota. And these would be covered by project abatement funds, which are specific to parking lots and sidewalks.
I did just notice that it's 1 penny off, so we would change that. But this fits within the available dollars that we have right now. Like Reed said, there's like $381,000 in that fund, and this is $369,800. So it fits within the current budget.
thank you.
369,816.32. I must have typed my note to Janet
Sorry,
wrong. I
nope,
apologize.
We'll just fix it in the minutes.
Yep. Okay, so do we have a motion?
And this would be done before the school year too, just to let you know if we move forward with this, we could have it done before school starts.
I move to approve of the approval for the Sourcewell proposal for parking lot mill overlay and sidewalk repairs at Forest View Middle School for a cost not to exceed $369,816 and how many cents?
32 cents.
32 cents. As presented.
Second all of that.
Okay, we have a first from Director Blacklance, a second from Director Boyles. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And Bob abstained.
Okay. Okay, next we're up with Mr. Murtha on handbooks, student handbooks.
Doesn't usually take him that long to get up here.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, it's dancing.
It's that time of year again. We're back with the handbooks, a sure sign that school's getting ready to start, and we're really excited about it. There weren't many changes to the structure and the nature of the handbooks nor its content because there were no significant policy changes during the last academic year. So there's some updates of just some informational pieces. The primary ones are just some updating of some links for family skyward access and just some of the language that was in there. You see this in the red line version. The really two larger areas was the removal of the Google student account information that had existed, the replacement of that information later along with the rest of the technology information, and then the inclusion of the e-learning days information. So those would constitute the two largest changes. If you wanted to dig into the text itself, I identified page numbers in the agenda that are in the Forest View Handbook. That was the one we used as the exemplar. Last year, you asked not to be sent every single handbook to be printed and to be read when the changes are usually standard across all of them. So we provided an exemplar from the elementary, the middle, and the high school. And the changes are the same across all three of those. That's why page references in the original communication were for Forest View. So that constitutes the totality of it. The process that we use is the same process as always. If we identify any major policy or procedural changes that need to occur, we send out that information to the principals and to the directors and ask for them to give us feedback on this. We usually ask them to write whatever changes they want. Then we start the process of negotiating and wordsmithing and hammering it all out and putting it in. It takes about 2 months to pound out a good handbook, and that's what we bring to you, and that's what you have tonight.
Just a question on staff. I know like Dan Fisher's name was still in the middle book one, and I don't know if it's too late to change.
It's not too late to change. We can make that as an amendment to the request.
Okay, and then Charlie Campbell, who was just recent.
These are staffing changes that occurred prior to the completion of the galleys.
Yeah, maybe you just put director or whatever, yeah.
We will just clarify the removal.
I would just, I know there's been a few staff changes in the last month or two, just verify
That's the
all
danger
of
of
those.
including the staff.
But some you need to, yeah.
Some you do. The static administrative staff and the clerical support numbers that the parents interact with, those should be permanent there. It's always a long-going conversation of, do we put everybody in? Because by the end of September, it's different.
Yeah, and I knew that, I just, yeah. I want to make sure before we go to print, we take one last look at those.
All right. I will make sure that changes as well. Are there any other recommended changes you'd want to see in the handbooks?
They look good. It's a lot of information.
Yep, and every year we just get a little bit better at it and a little bit quicker. This also constitutes the update for me from later on in the board. It's July, none of the TOSAs are in, so I have no curriculum teams writing at this time. So July is usually a month where I don't have a curriculum report for you. Okay. I know you guys want to get out of here earlier. Thank you much.
Thank you.
I'll move to approve the handbooks as presented.
I'll second.
We have a first from Director Hagel and a second from Director Blacklance to approve the student handbooks as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Look at, you're up here before we even get started. Good job. Okay, our sports medicine services contract with Essentia.
All right, so we've been working with Essentia for, I don't know, Charlie, you have more history there, but they proposed, Yeah, a long time. They proposed this new agreement, which is a 5-year agreement. It has a one-time $50,000 contribution for updating our weight room equipment, and then 2 FTE. So in the past, we had gotten the 2 FTE. Last year was the first year that they had done that free of charge, and then prior to that, we did pay for those services. So it's a very nice.
Generous.
Yeah, very generous of them to put this before us. The only thing that I was going to note was, there is, we do have to get the written approval prior for any of the, if we want to have other medical advertising or anything like that, but Charlie didn't feel like that was a problem, so.
How would they do the logo in the football field?
That's a great question. It's actually really common, and it's almost disturbing to know what you have to do that. But every line on that football field, they actually shave that beautiful green grass right down. It's just like carpet in your living room. They create a perfect inlay that gets glued right on top of the existing mat, and then they give it a haircut so all the fibers match the same length. I don't know that we would do the field logo while we are currently operating on this generation of synthetic turf. At some point down the road, this would have to be replaced, and this language I think would apply there. But if Essentia is willing to cover the cost of that, we'd certainly explore that opportunity with them. So
I was kind of surprised to see that. And it wouldn't be like in the center, it would be in some.
Probably end zone or along a sideline in an area out of play, but yet still visible.
Okay.
And I should add that, in exchange for marketing opportunities at their cost.
Okay. Do you have a motion? Or questions?
And a lot of questions for Charlie.
Great.
Later.
Yeah, later.
The room is getting warm,
Not
Mr.
related to
Hagler.
this, no, but I'll move to approve as presented.
Thank you, Director Hagelin.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first from Director Hagelin, a second from Director Boyles. Any further discussion or questions?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thanks, Marcy.
Thank you. And next, our renewal for our high school league.
Yes. Do you have questions of me about the renewal? This is an annual membership renewal. Each year, we choose, as a school district and authorized through board action, our desire to be members of the Minnesota State High School League. They are the governing body for sanctioned high school sports and activities, fine arts activities, and competitions in the state of Minnesota. 400 and some member schools choose to become members, and they sponsor and promote most of the activities at the state level and section level in which you're familiar.
Charlie, you and I have served on the Central Lakes Minnesota State High School League Board together for a long time, and as I'm sure saw in their memo last year, there was quite a significant increase in the dues. Can you explain why that happened? And it stayed pretty stable for the coming school year, but can you just explain that a little bit in case anyone has any questions?
I did. As league tournaments gained popularity over the years, they used revenues from those state tournaments to basically fund themselves, which kept revenue, or I will say fees for schools, at a very, very low rate. Even prior to the pandemic, the league was starting to understand that they needed to have maybe a different funding model, because what they were finding is budgeting each year based on how tournaments went was a really difficult way to run an organization. Things like tournament matchups made a difference in attendance and revenues. Things like weather for outdoor tournaments made a huge difference in tournament revenues. Expenses are almost always fixed when you run tournaments, so you really get dependent on the revenues. And the way that our region activities work, The way that high school state tournaments work is there are a limited number of tournaments that essentially create revenues and pay for the rest of the tournaments. So your big tournaments, dance, hockey, basketball, football, they generate revenues and they pay for things like speech and cross country, which do not generate any sort of ticket sales to pay for them. And so when COVID hit right towards the end of the winter state tournaments just over a year ago, the league found out very quickly that their funding model was not going to work moving forward. They authorized an emergency increase in the dues. Thankfully, we were able to use federal or state monies to pay those excess dues a year ago. Just chatting with Marcy, we're kind of exploring that option for the coming year as well. But the dues went from consistently about $3,000 annually for Brainerd. Now we pay per activity. We pay, so we have a slate of 34 or 31 high school programs, but we have speech and we pay for music and a couple of other activities like that as well. So our share has historically been $3,000. It crept up to about $3,800. It jumped to almost $18,000 in total last year. It's going to be the same for 21, 22. The good news is moving forward, the financial plan is not to continue to charge Brainerd and its member schools at that much higher rate. It is actually to give a portion of those state tournament proceeds back to member schools. I'm not 100% sure which way that comes, if it comes in a rebate check at the end of a year or if it buys down the dues the next year. My very quick understanding is that if the state tournaments do well and we would basically see a credit for the 22, 23 dues. So instead of $18,000, maybe our share of those dues would only be $8,000, and so they would be reduced. So that's the financial model moving forward. And that's, I guess, one part of what you're authorizing tonight with that membership resolution.
Thank you.
I move for approval of the 2021-22 renewal for membership in the Minnesota State High School League as presented.
I'll second. Thank you. So we have a motion from Director Blacklance, a second from Director Sjogren. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Speed, Charlie.
Thank you.
I read that without my cheaters. I forgot them. I read them without my cheaters.
Next up is our milk bid.
Big boy.
Still got a ways to go.
Good evening. So Brainerd Food Service went out for bid for milk. We solicited bids to Schroeder's, Kemp's, and Prairie Farms. Kemp's was the only one that completed a sealed bid, and so it is my recommendation that the board approve Kemp's. It is about 1 cent per carton increase from last year. So they are the only bidder.
I'm not surprised it went up.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
And I know you've answered this before by email, but can you tell me again, and if we could silence this so my children can't hear this question, why do we do chocolate milk in schools?
Okay, so without getting into the list of ingredients, there's a variety of a list of ingredients, and I don't have them on me, that you can only get, so nutrients that you can only get by drinking milk. So if we offer a choice, we let children choose a milk so they get the nutritions they need. Also, with a number of students, it's the only milk that they're gonna drink in the entirety of their day, of their week. So we would prefer them get some of those valued nutrients in their system. We also do the Smarter Lunchroom movement, so that means that we are placing our white milk in front and we're making that chocolate less available. So starting next year, we're only gonna have chocolate available on Thursdays and Fridays, or this coming school year, sorry, on Thursdays and Fridays. So it's an option, it's just not every day.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Sure, I'll move to approve the milk bid for the 21-22 school year as presented.
Second.
First from Director Boyles, a second from Director Glantz to approve the milk bid as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, next up is the approval of the bread bid.
All right, so much like the milk bid, I sent out bids to Bimbo Bakeries and Panagold. Panagold was the only one that submitted a bid. Panagold has been our primary vendor for 15 plus years. For a number of years, they didn't even do a price increase, I think for 6 years in a row. We see about a 5-cent increase in our products this coming year. It's not surprising with the inflation of food and drivers and availability of product. It is my recommendation that we go ahead and approve Panagold for next year. They provide wonderful service and product, and we're really happy with them as a vendor.
So I see, like with the small hamburger buns and the large hamburger, you have 60 count, 30 count, but for dinner roll, I'm assuming it's not $1.39 per dinner roll?
No, 12 count.
It's 12 count?
And a dinner roll is an option that we have if we don't have a baker on hand. So Brainerd has consistently baked their own tea rolls, French loaf breads, hamburger buns, hot dog buns. The only thing that we don't bake is sliced bread. So this bread bid, yes, we utilize them every single week, but not every school is going to be utilizing them. We cook and bake a ton of our own scratch food, so this is kind of our backup.
So anytime there's not a count listed, like French bread or...
French bread is one loaf.
One, okay. One.
Yep. Tea biscuits, I'm sorry, I probably forgot to put it on there, it's 12 count.
And then hoagie buns, same thing?
Hoagie buns, 24.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I'll move to approve the bread bid as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first from Director Hagel and a second from Director Sjogren to approve the bread bid as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. A lot of motions today. Meal prices.
Until school's coming. Yeah.
Okay, so it is my recommendation actually that we table this. Late Friday night of last week, we received notification from MDE that we do not have a federal minimum requirement for adult meals. So currently, right now this summer, our minimum is $4.50 for an adult meal running the summer program. This coming fall, we're gonna run something called SSO, which is called Seamless Summer Option. So we're going back to the National School Lunch Program, but kids get to eat breakfast and lunch for free. Now, MDE came out last week, really late, about 6 p.m., and said, we don't have a minimum. I would propose that we keep the meal pricing for adults at $2.80 for breakfast and $4.10 for lunch. That's what they currently are, and we have the ability to cover that cost within that price point.
Okay, so
Oh,
not table it, but just change it.
Just change it, get rid of it,
Okay.
yeah.
So not as presented, but.
Right.
So then the pre-K through 12th grade would still be 0 for the...
Yep, so pre-K through 12th grade, it is free for all kids this coming school year, and that is an option that was given to us through the USDA and MDE, and we are going to utilize that, and we've already applied for that, so.
So what does that do to our free and reduced percentage as far as when we try to get that filled out?
That's a very good question.
Good question today.
Yes, so we do have an application that will be mailed out at the end of the month like we always do. And we do really urge families to fill out that form. They can use that for a variety of reductions throughout the community and in the school district. So if you're looking for a sports reduction, a technology reduction, a reduction in childcare or pre-K, some of those programs, you can still use that free and reduced application for those services. And then also, of course, it does tie to our compensatory revenue. So we are urging families to fill it out, so.
So we're mentioning all that in the letter and we'll
Absolutely,
do a follow-up.
yes.
We will, yeah.
Have that.
And, yeah, and, you know, our legislature did a lot of really nice things for us this year. That was one thing that we were asking for, but it didn't get in the bill. So we are just gonna have to be really diligent about that.
This is great for our families and everything, but it makes a little more work on your part.
It does. Alyssa's department in particular and the principals in particular.
So we've already done some pre-planning and we've done some letters and we've already started to set up kind of what that's gonna look like for us in our department, but we are going to tackle that, so.
And the good news is, you know, going in now, because I remember we had this conversation where we got kind of behind the 8 ball on it. So we've got
Yeah, we know now.
months of time to
Yep.
plan ahead this time.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, because you were on the board when we had that discussion, so it was like January, probably. And yeah, so that's a good point. Thank you. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the meal prices as Alyssa recommends?
I'll move that we approve the 2021-22 meal prices as amended in her presentation.
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Director Boyles, a second from Director Blacklance. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Marcy Lord with MSBA Policy 421.
So it is just standard language from MSBA, and the only change is their recommendation to define financial interest. Otherwise, everything else is just everything they recommend.
So it would be first reading tonight, and we'd approve it at the August 9th meeting.
So do you
I'll
need
move to approve the first reading.
I'll second.
We have a first from Director Sjogren, a second from Director Blacklance to approve the first reading of MSBA Policy 421. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I seconded that, so people listening wouldn't think I just approve or motion for the food-related items.
I was gonna comment, you did more
Charles
talking when we were
kinda woke
talking
up
about
on
food.
We lit up on that 24 count.
And now we have Heidi Hahn here to talk about the Northern Pines contract.
Good evening. I'm here to present and recommend that you accept the contracts as presented from Northern Pines Mental Health Center. There is an error, and it's when it says for Lincoln Education Center is included. We have one contract that represents all of our schools within the district, and then separate ones that support service at Brainerd High School, and then we have a district social work position that specializes in crisis counseling. So we actually have,
Social work position was district-wide.
correct. Well, right now we're going to move that over to the Brainerd Learning Center.
Okay.
With the addition of the guidance counselor at Forest View, that position had been located at Forest View the previous year. So the recommendation is to move that position over to the Brainerd Learning Center to provide some additional crisis support. Overall in the contract, you'll see that there's a decrease of $13,834. Part of that decrease is due to we no longer have services at South Campus. So we've reduced the contracts in reflection of that. Northern Pines has been a service provider and providing mental health services with our students for over 25 years. So we value their partnership. Any questions?
Periodically, we've gotten reports back on satisfaction surveys.
Correct. So they will work directly with the students and do a student satisfaction and family satisfaction survey. They also do a quarterly report where they respond to the services being provided. And so we can ask if you would like to have them come present on that data. I'm sure they'd be willing to do so.
I think that would be good. Do we have a motion?
It's a long one, nobody wants to read it. I will make a motion to approve the Northern Pines mental health contracts for Lincoln Education Center, Brainerd High School Lunchroom, and district social workers as presented.
And that's a clarification when it says Lincoln, it's all. We have comprehensive mental health services pre-K through 21 in all of our buildings. So it shouldn't just isolate Lincoln. So it's for the Brainerd Public School District.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first from Director Boyles and a second from Director Blacklance to approve the Northern Pines mental health contracts for District 181. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And now, Marcy is back here to talk about a funding agreement with Sourcewell for South Campus. We're gonna have to rename that pretty soon.
All right, at a previous board meeting, you guys had recognized a donation from Sourcewell, and this is just basically putting it in writing. They are contributing $5.2 million for the South Campus remodel, and it's over 3 years. And the only thing to note is that we do have to keep it as a non-educational, that for a period of 10 years, it will not convert the project to a non-educational related use or purpose. And then if we should sell or liquidate, we would have to first apply the funds to them and return those funds. Otherwise, it's also another generous gift from our partners.
So does that mean if we were to sell the South Campus?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Correct.
To a
10 years.
non-education, right?
What's that?
To a non-education.
Yeah.
Is that prorated?
It is not.
Okay.
So it'd be the full amount?
Full amount with no accrued interest.
Okay.
I'll move to approve the construction funding agreement with Sourcewell for $5.2 million as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a first from Director Hagelin and a second from Director Boyles to approve the funding agreement with Sourcewell for $5.2 million for South Campus construction. Any further discussion?
Just thanks again to Sourcewell. This
Yeah.
was really, really big.
It's really big.
As I've said before, we unfortunately, in a way, waited. One of the last buildings we're doing is probably one of the more critical facilities that we'll have in this district. So I'm excited to see it come to fruition.
I agree, so. Okay, so any other further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we're approval of the updated 10-year-long facilities maintenance plan.
So annually, we have to approve the plan. Unless we issue bonds, then we revise the plan. But the revenue side is basically taking our projected pupil units, putting that in, and figuring out how much revenue our LTFM will generate. And then the expense side, Mr. TC here puts together a plan, a 10-year plan of what our projected expenses are. And we work with ICS and they give us a projection based on our project, combine the two. And that's what's in your packet tonight is what is our projected revenue, fund balance, and expenses for the next 10 years. And we just want to note, I mean, 5 years is good, 10 years, it gets a little hard to project.
And with, obviously with all of the improvements that we're making to these facilities, right, we have to restart all of those timers on all the improvements that we make, maintenance activities that we take to every single facility. So we are going to create a master plan for our maintenance of our facilities moving forward. We obviously have done needs assessments, but we're gonna have a master plan to address all these just because of the challenges we're gonna face with all of the needs across all the buildings coming due at one time. So we're gonna be creating that plan. We'll do some of it early, we'll do some of it on time, and then we'll do some of it a little bit late, but we'll work that plan and create that. And then that, moving forward, that's what we're gonna see in this LTFM plan. But a lot of it, like Marcy said right now, has to do with our construction spend as well, because we're spending some of these LTFM dollars on that construction. Okay.
And this has to be updated every July.
Yep.
So this will be this year, and then next year it'll be updated again as you get closer.
And it's a 10-year plan, but what we're looking at is that first year, it sets that budget for that first year, and then the rest of it, we can continue to update that plan every single year, so.
Any questions? Motion?
I'll move to approve the 10-year plan.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first from Director Sjogren, a second from Director Blacklands to approve the updated 10-year long-term facilities.
Maintenance.
Did I say that wrong?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Plan as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I think you guys are getting tired of saying aye. Okay, next, approval of the superintendent of schools being identified as the official local education authority for the Minnesota Department of Education for federal and state purposes for recertification purposes.
This is just something we approve every year so that I can sign off on grants and funding and dollars that come through the state.
I'll make a motion for the approval of this as submitted. presented.
A second.
So we have a first from Director Boyles, a second from Director Blacklands. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And now we're going on to a discussion regarding the updated draft letter of commitment to equity, which I think we all have in front of us.
At the last board meeting, you had just made some recommendations to me to meet with the board chair and vice chair to take a look at the letter that was approved on June 8th of 2020, and to include some of the discussion that we had at the last meeting and some of the recommendations that came from the administrative team at our instructional meeting in June. And so this is a draft letter that we talked about when we looked at it, and again, tonight it's open for discussion and for your input moving forward.
And since we're going to do a motion on this, we probably don't even need to sign it, just our yays or nays will be appropriate unless you want.
That's kind of what I thought too. You really don't need both. You could do one or the other.
I'll just say I'm very proud of all the work that we're doing. It was good to hear from APAC and learn a little bit tonight. I think we're all learning a lot through this process, and it's important that each child, and I think the audience and us agree, each child in our district needs to be treated with respect and dignity, and all need to have opportunity to succeed in our schools. And I think that's what this letter says, and provide some additional direction for administration to proceed with help for that.
Do we know if Bob has any comments?
Yeah, I would just add that I agree with Ruth. I think there really isn't any big changes to this. It's just rewritten a little bit different way, but it reaffirms our commitment to equity work within our school district and for the future. So I strongly support this.
Yeah, as Kevin and I talked about last time, we're new to the group, so on one hand, reaffirming this letter it's good to do, it's important. I also took to heart Tom's comment too, and I don't want to paraphrase you incorrectly, but I don't know if we need to, and I think what Ms. Boudreau said too, I appreciate it. I think that this is an important letter, but the bullet points in this are the most important part and the work that we need to do to move this forward. So again, our future conversations aren't just a letter and patting ourselves on the back, not saying that that's what we're doing, but just signing a letter isn't enough. Doing the good work is what we need to do.
I also believe it's important, and what's a part of this letter is the aspect of transparent and common communication, and making sure that we are public in all of our work as it relates to equity work, and that's certainly a goal, and it's important from all sides, and it's something that I take very seriously, and quite honestly look forward to the continued growth of our community in terms of what does that mean, and what are we talking about, and how are we doing it, and all very important stuff, and
Courageous conversations.
Yep, tough conversations, absolutely.
And we've learned the last few board meetings and from our email and our telephones, this is not an easy topic. This isn't something that everyone feels exactly the same about, and that's okay, but we have to push past that. I think we talked a little bit about that. There's that discomfort point that we gotta keep pressing on. You don't learn if you don't grow and you don't get a little uncomfortable. So I know I've had a couple uncomfortable conversations, but I've appreciated them. So I think that we just have to do that. And I think everyone needs to commit to doing that. We're not all gonna get our way on this, no matter what we do and what we, presenters we have or speakers we have or curriculum that goes out there, whatever it is, books that might be read at a staff development. Not everyone's always going to be 100% on board with it, but I've said to a couple people who have reached out to me that I trust that we have professional adults in our district who, whatever staff development opportunities maybe come their way, or whatever other example you want to use, they also have they're wise adults. They can discern the information. We've read books or attended speakers or workshops or whatever it is, that some I've walked away and it's been career changing for me, and some I've thought, well, that was a big waste of time, but I can decide whether or not I put it into my practice.
Well, I know at our last meeting, I had shared some concerns about this, and I still have those concerns. I shared back in kind of in detail, and I don't know that I need to go through each line item as to why I'm concerned about this, and just making some statements. I really appreciated our update in our presentation from our APEC committee. It was very helpful. I'd like to see that continue. I think they did a wonderful job. With that, though, I would like to see what we committed to, and I'd like to see a progress report in writing where we are. And that's kind of how I look at whatever we committed to back in 2018, or whenever that was. I would rather just see an update on this. So to me, there's a lot of some things in here are just statements. There's some financial pieces, and I'm just not comfortable in committing to it. I've heard a lot about that we've got to have tough conversations. To me, these are not tough conversations. This is simple. We are just people. We should be able to have these conversations. So I don't see any of this being tough. I don't think we need to, in my opinion, state some of these things in here. So I'm just not comfortable with this, and can't support the cause. Of course, is very important. We want to have that comfort for every child. I don't care what their background is. I don't care what their color of their skin is or what their beliefs are. It's important as educators that we provide those opportunities for them. But I'm just not comfortable with some of the things that are written in this letter.
Well, I mean, Jana kind of stole everybody's thunder at the last board meeting when she got the quote of the night, which was, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase you, so correct me if I say anything wrong, but words are words, the work is the work. And it's the work that matters. But I have to say that the work becomes exceedingly difficult when people bend words and use words for things they're not intended to be used for. And I really don't think this body in particular is guilty of that. I think we have reasonable and adult conversations amongst ourselves. I think that across the spectrum of beliefs and worldviews that populate our community, we have some issues with people on really both extremes, if you will, bending words and changing the shape so that as we try to undertake the work, it becomes infinitely more difficult to understand the work that we're trying to do. So it's basic words. There are complicated words like critical race theory, which I've stopped responding to emails on because we're not teaching it in the schools, and I'm done. I'm done with it. But equity. So here's my new favorite one is equity, is equality, not equity. I see it out in the audience tonight. Okay, so that's fine. If we employ that philosophy across the board, let's just forget the school system for a minute. All men's shoes should be made in size 9.5 because that's the average men's shoe size. So the people with the small feet can put some socks in the toes, and the people with the big feet can trim their toenails shorter and fit into there. We can stop construction on the South Campus. We can stop free and reduced meal programs. We can stop the Brainerd Learning Center where some of our most at-risk students go to get a second chance at graduating from high school. Those are all forms of equity. Now, if racial equity is your issue, that's fine. We can have a dialogue about that. But equality and equity are not the same thing, in my view. And so I don't have a problem with the words in this particular letter as written. I did some of the earlier versions of it. So some changes were made to this to make it more universal, more global, and not to have it solely focused on the racial element so that we can focus on equity for every single child that goes to school in our district. And yes, APAC did a fantastic job. It was a very compelling and passionate presentation, but they're in the same boat we're in. These are all just words. We're just laying down railroad tracks. We still got to put a train on this thing and run it. And we have to do that with everybody that wants to have a place at the table, having a place at the table. And I've listened to everybody. And I agree with a lot of what some of our folks in the community are concerned about. But until we get the definitions correct, it's going to make it really, really hard. So for me, this letter is about equity. I am about equity, and I support this letter.
I guess the final thought that I would have is that the letter is important, and from where I sit, not just for the words that are there, which are significant, for areas that I've shared before from my seat in terms of being a parent, that it sure is nice and comforting that the school district is making an effort in sharing some words that'll add to accountability. Accountability to not just my children, but to all of you in this room, holding a sign, regardless of what that sign says. But an accountability, probably even more so, for this board, for as we move forward and we act as a board, that we can always come back and point at this, that hey, this is something that we agreed on, or at least that we voted in favor of as a board, and that we can nod our heads to. But accountability is significant, and that's what I see in terms of giving the nod to this letter. Is it perfect? Is it all encompassing? Could we bring pieces in and out of this? Possibly. But again, as I've said before, this is a very good and a very significant start. And I'm so pleased that we're wrapping up this discussion on this particular item.
Just one other comment, if I could, sensing knowing that this will get approved. What I would ask then, I live by what measured gets done. So I don't know how much we've progressed since we wrote the first letter. So if we're going to approve this, if this gets approved tonight, then I would ask that we at least get biannual or perhaps quarterly updates as to how we're progressing. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see something measurable on each one. So if there's statements, somehow we figure out, how do we know whether we're making success? So, because some of these are purely just statements. Mm-hmm. So I would ask that we figure out a way to measure to make sure that we are headed in the right direction then.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to build on, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ruth.
I was just going to say, I agree that we need to measure these, and what I like is most of them are measurable, and a lot of them we've already gotten a start on. So I think we could have a quarterly update and we'd see some progress, and I think that's a great idea.
And I do think the update's critical, but even more critical, I think, is that we take extra human steps to make sure that our work is transparent. We have an equity task force, of which Jan and I just joined and have been to one meeting. We still don't, the community still has no idea who's on that task force. It's not published on the website anywhere. In fact, nothing about the equity task force is published on the district's public website, and that's not transparent, in my view. And I'd like to see a little more detail in the summaries that we bring forward at this meeting on the things that we cover there. But again, I don't think it's, no matter what anybody's belief system is, they have a right to line of sight into absolutely everything that we're doing.
I think I agree 100%. I don't know if that every bullet point could have a goal, nor does it maybe need to. We could probably come up with a few goals to know that we're moving the needle forward, maybe, and develop some sort of a dashboard that could have a spot on the website or at these meetings or something.
I think I can speak for the task force that I sit on that we're referencing here. And to address what you shared, Tom, is what you shared is significant there, because that's part of where we're at with the task force that I've shared is we're still really getting our legs beneath us in terms of who we are and also where we're headed. And but to add a metric to this process is significant, and I definitely would agree with that, and I feel comfortable with that. So a lot of words here shared, I think, could really flow into that task force that I know gets a little nervy for some right now because we're still in that process of quite honestly what what some would call a storming phase of a committee or a task force. We're just, again, getting our legs beneath us. And, but these type of conversations will do a lot and go a long way in terms of supporting those that are a part of that, and making sure we're accountable to be transparent to our constituency, and most importantly, our students.
Great discussions. So at this time, do we have a motion to approve this updated commitment to equity?
I'll make a motion.
I will second that motion.
Further discussion?
My question is, I heard about the signatures. Would the board like to vote and signatures, or one or the other? I just don't have clarity on that. And I also think that if you'd like me to add that we will report quarterly, that could be added on there as well.
And I'm not saying it has to
You're
be
not saying that,
quarterly,
okay.
but to
Just
tack on
regularly.
another thing that we don't.
Periodically, yeah.
Periodically, okay.
I'm okay with it. I'm just posting this as well. You okay with that?
And have Bob sign it as the chair?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that too.
Okay, so we have a first from Director Sjogren, a second from Director Blacklands to approve this letter with just the board chair's signature.
But vote at the board.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's
I
what we're
understand
gonna,
that.
so.
Yeah, that's not, yeah, I'm fine with that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. So 4 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 abstention. Next, we'll go on to the informational section of part of our board meeting. So curriculum report, Mr. Murther said he didn't have one, so we're to the business services report.
All right, at the last board meeting, we talked about the budget for 21-22, and there was discussion on, follow-up at the August 9th meeting. So we're a little ahead of schedule, but we wanted to address this right away. So I put together this presentation, and please follow up with me if you guys would like something different or more information. There's been talk about all this federal funds, even with the Wesby building, ESSER 3. So I just basically put an outline of ESSER 2 funds, what the plan is. You can see the allocation is about $5 million. And in the budget, we had the COVID coordinator, which we're probably going to remove because we don't think that's going to be needed for this next year, but we did have it in there just in case. And then a secretary for a couple of months who will now no longer, she actually shifted to the high school. There is a tech administrator full-time that was to help with the help desk tickets. We continued that for another year. Long-term subs, that is just taking last year what we spent on long-term subs and rolling it forward. This is a guessing game because we don't know how many people will be out with COVID, if it'll be the same as last year, less, more, but that is basically what we spent on subs last year. Food service, buildings and grounds truck, you guys have seen this. We were gonna use CRF funds for it. We were going to use ESSER 1 funds for it. It's been delayed because we just can't get it. So now we're gonna try to pull it from ESSER 2 funds. The estimated delivery time is August, I believe, so hopefully we will finally be able to make that purchase. The next line item is reducing class size reduction in elementaries. So we have our target number for K through 4, right? And then we have a 10% above and a 10% below. When we looked at this year's budget, we went to the high of the 10%, or in our world, the orange. And we use ESSER 2 funds to get back to the target, and that comes to the tune, that's in that $2.3 million, along with a counselor at Forest View, a curriculum specialist, a system specialist, and additional budget for marketing, trying to get some of these kids that left us to come back. You'll see that that's for just 21-22, and then for 22-23, it's 1.4. Basically, it's kind of my difference. So once this bucket of money is gone, I'm gonna go into ESSER 3. So the total I estimate will be still that 2.3 that we need, but the difference is just trying to get to that 5 million that we have in ESSER 2 funds. The PPE cleaning supplies, same thing. It's an estimate. As we get more into this year and know what is going to be required from the state, that may change. Hotspots as well, if we're offering it to families or not. A big question, you know, is distance learning going to be required? As of right now, it's not. So if that was to change, we'd have to look at that line item. And then the administrative line item, all federal grants, we're allowed to charge for our time, right? You know, Lane's, myself, anybody's time that's spent on these grants, and you can charge up to 5%, and that helps our general fund. So that's a line item you'll see in all of our federal grants, is that we're taking that 5%. And that is ESSER 2 funds, just a kind of a quick detail of what we're spending those funds on. Is there any questions on that? Sorry.
Where did it go?
Yeah.
The class size reduction interventions, right? So we are, I think you guys have done underneath that, like you've got that itemized out, kind of like broken down a little bit too.
Correct.
Because I know with Corey's departure, we sort of haven't really addressed that marketing piece, and we probably should be.
Yep, and I know that Carla is kind of taking that over right now, and we made an offer today for someone to fill Corey's position.
Oh, cool.
We haven't had they're gonna get back to us tomorrow. And so we may have to call a special board meeting just for some hirings between now and August 9th if we need to do that. Otherwise, we'll approve it on August 9th. But we will keep going with that marketing piece. That's a huge and important piece. And some of this, as you can see, these funds have to be used by 9/30 of 23. And so we have to use these funds before you can go into the ESSER 3 funds that's the next page. So, yeah.
Okay,
But
thank
yeah,
you.
we will keep going on that, the marketing piece, because, and right now, every week we're getting more kids back, and so we're really excited about that. In fact, I saw a thing on the news this morning about the U of M that their enrollment is coming back really nicely. Well, we just saw 17 additional kids come from last week to this week, and so we're hoping that as school starts, that it builds that confidence. So.
And the end game plan is a lot of these positions we're coding for 2 years, and at the end of the 2 years, hopefully we'll have our enrollment back and we will be able to fund them, and if not, they'll have to be eliminated. The ESSER 3 funds, so you can see there's about 11.4 million. 226,000 of that is for summer school. So the very first line is summer school, less that admin of 5%. And we weren't aware of these funds when we were going into our summer school planning. So you see that there's nothing for this year yet that we're going to be coding. It's going to be all planning for the following years, summer school. We could potentially use them, but like I said, most of our planning had already been done. So we're not going to dip into those funds yet. The next line item is the difference that I talked about from ESSER 2 to ESSER 3 for those interventionist, counselor, curriculum, all that. And the very next line item, honestly, there's a big question mark there because we talked about 2-year positions. If we wanted to, we could technically do an additional year with these funds for those positions, but it's a big question mark, right? It all depends on how we look with enrollment. And then there is that line item for administration. And then when we talk about WESB and what we can do here, this bucket of funding we could also use for indoor air quality. So there's that $7.4 million that we don't have a plan or any known expenses at this time that could potentially be used for the air quality improvements.
These dollars also, when we did the preliminary budget at the last meeting, and we said that with our conservative budgeting that we've done, that we were deficit spending by a little over $700,000. That could come out of this $7 million as well. And so we just felt that it was really important that we bring this to you at this time, but we're trying to get our enrollment back and do those things that we can be self-sustaining as we move forward. But we're very appreciative of the fact that we have some additional dollars until 9/30 of 2024, some time in which to do that. But like you said, that marketing campaign is really huge, so.
And if our numbers don't come to fruition, you know, in the fall of what we have in the budget, these dollars can be used again for staff that we probably should have cut or reduced when we were planning, had we known that our student numbers would be down. So we also have that to fall back on as well.
How much retroactive slushing, so to speak, you know, so say we get to the end of this and things go better and we're sitting with a pot of dollars, do things get to slide backward? Do we return the funds? How does that?
So these funds, if we don't spend them, would go back to the federal government. So we're trying to use them as wisely as we can. And then we had talked about that unassigned, you know, being around that 800,000 mark and how the comfort level of that. So I just did a brief review for the last 5 years. So when you look at that number, I know it seems like a large number, but it's actually less than 1% of our total budget. And then in the previous year, we had 182,000 projected, and or previous year, current year, I'm crossing 2 years, sorry guys. 2021, so we don't have that number yet of how we're gonna end, but it was about 0.2% of our total budget. And then in 1920, it was projected.
And we're optimistic.
Yes.
And we're doing the audit early, so that, and we're optimistic that we're gonna end up better than what our conservative budgeting brought us.
Correct. And so in the previous years, you can see the differences. There's the first column is what we were projected at preliminary budget, and then the unassigned actual is how we did actually end in that year. Generally, there's a swing as high as 82,000 up to 1.8 million. So we're hoping that it's in the positive, but the average of that is 500,000. So even if you figure that we have a swing of 500,000 at the end of this, we'll be closer to $300,000 deficit. And as Lane mentioned, the incoming kindergarten, if I put in what we had for as of today, we're almost close to 347,000. So we'd be in the positive, but that's if everybody shows up on day one. So I just
Our
want
kindergarten numbers are looking nice right now.
Yep.
So, yep.
Yeah. So that it just kind of has some historical information, so you guys can see that there is some swings there, and it does seem like a large number, but when you look at an $80-some million budget, it's less than 1%.
Typically, we don't have fallout with kindergarten enrollment, do we, in the beginning? If I remember right?
There's some parents that in the end decide that they're gonna keep their children home one more year.
Okay.
Last year though, because of COVID, we had a lot of people who, our
As
first
I-
grade numbers are
This
very
year,
low.
I mean, I
Yeah.
assume you get the same emails I get. We have parents that are waiting to see if there's a mask mandate from the state this year too.
Correct.
Do we see new first graders enrolling who like homeschooled kindergarten and?
Not huge numbers, no. I think a lot of them were just kept home and now they're coming for kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah. So the kindergarten numbers are high and the first grade numbers are lower. Yeah.
So what's next? We talked about August 9th, but we really would like to continue to monitor the student enrollment weekly. And then we're holding on any requests for adding positions until we know what our enrollment looks like further into the year. And then we would like to review the 2021 audited results with the school board. As Lane said, we're projected to, I believe we're going to be better than what is in the revised budget. And then we would review and revise the 21-22 budget based on our known enrollment, what we have for staffing, and then you guys would get presented that new number of what it would look like.
So we'd like to change the time frame just a little bit. We felt that it was important to give you this information, and then these will be the steps that we'll follow to make sure that you're kept in the loop as to how the budget's going. Good.
Marcy.
Thank you. I don't have anything else unless you guys had any questions.
Nice job.
Thanks.
Okay, so next up is the superintendent's report.
Okay, I'm going to keep mine really short because I know everybody's ready to go home. But I just want to remind the board that the continuous improvement retreat is August 10th and 11th. So if you have a chance to stop by and see some of the work that our administration and staff are doing, it would be great. But other than that, I think everything has been self-explanatory tonight. So thank you.
Where's the CIP retreat at?
Tim, where would they go for CIP?
Where will they go physically?
Yes, if they were going to.
Probably
Each.
200 and 217, but that's going to be a topic for
Okay. Well, I'll let you know.
And we still have to let you know
Yeah.
if we're going, so there's not more than 3 of us.
Correct.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I got it on my calendar.
We'll keep you posted though
Right,
as
well,
we
I'd
move
be
forward.
more than willing to go if there's a place, but I just wanted to give other people an opportunity.
I forgot that.
Yeah, I just sent an email to him and said, here's when I'm available, tell me when a good time.
That's all I have.
Okay, okay, wonderful. So we have some future meetings here. Let's see. And August 9th is our next regular school board meeting. We talked about the CIP retreats, new teacher breakfast coming up in August 23rd. Workshop week for staff, August 30th.
Hey, I do have one different thing. August 30th through September 2nd is the back to school workshop. And in the past, the first day back has always been the big where everybody meets in Tornstrom. This year we're doing it different because of construction, because of continuous improvement, all those things. And so the morning of September 2nd will be the back to school workshop. So we'd love to have the board there and we'll introduce you to the staff. And we're going to be at the Gitche Ziva.
Okay.
So it'll be really fun to be there. And I think we picked out a theme last week, so we're pretty excited about that too. So it'll be fun.
Good.
Got my outfit this weekend. Yeah, I got my outfit this weekend, so yeah, we could get the board involved.
Okay.
Could be fun.
Donuts.
Okay, so,
Ups the ante a bit. When
yeah, and then grand opening celebrations in September for all of our new buildings.
Yeah,
That'll be fun.
that'll be super fun.
So is there any other business to come before the board? And we can't have any other business tonight, that's right, so we didn't even need that.
Yeah, we didn't.
So we need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
So we have a motion from Director Boyles, a second from Director Blacklands.
Is that the time you have on your computer?
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.